Lucas Reed never thought a rainstorm would tear his life apart. One ride home, one dinner, one night that should have stayed quiet. But when your team lead asks you to stay and the office finds out, suddenly you're not just breaking protocol, you're breaking her career, your reputation, and every unspoken rule that keeps the workplace safe. They called it unprofessional, reckless, a scandal waiting to explode. And maybe they were right. But some lines, once crossed, can't be uncrossed. This is the story of what happened when we stopped pretending we didn't care. If you want to see how far a single choice can ripple, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights in the Portland Tech Solutions office had that particular quality of harshness that made everything look slightly unreal after 8 p.m. Lucas Reed sat at his desk on the third floor staring at 3 monitors displaying code that had stopped making sense about an hour ago. His coffee had gone cold in its chipped mug, the one with the faded logo from a conference he'd attended 2 years back and barely remembered. His neck ached from the angle he'd been holding it, that spot right between his shoulder blades sending out distress signals his brain had learned to ignore. And somewhere between the 7th and 8th debugging cycle, scrolling through lines of JavaScript that all started to look the same, he'd forgotten why he'd volunteered to stay late in the first place. The office around him had that hollow quality of after-hours emptiness. Most of the team had cleared out by 6. Marcus from DevOps had stuck around until 7:30, but even he'd eventually packed up, thrown Lucas a sympathetic wave, and headed out. Now it was just Lucas, the hum of the HVAC system, and whatever poor souls were still grinding away on other floors. He rubbed his eyes, blinked at the screen. The bug he was chasing was subtle, the kind that only showed up under specific conditions, and tracking it down felt like trying to catch smoke. He'd found it, fixed it, compiled, tested, and watched it pop up again in a slightly different form. Classic. Still here? Lucas looked up, startled. Claire Bennett stood in the doorway of her office, laptop bag slung over one shoulder, coat draped over her arm. Her dark hair had come loose from whatever she'd done with it that morning. He thought maybe a bun, something professional and out of the way, and now it hung around her face in a way that made her look less like the team lead who ran their sprint meetings and more like someone who'd just finished a long, exhausting day and wanted nothing more than to go home. There were shadows under her eyes that matched his own. Claire was 32, 6 years older than Lucas, and she had this way of carrying herself that made her seem both completely in control and somehow tired of having to be. She wore the same thing most days, dark jeans, a button-up shirt, minimal jewelry, practical, professional. The kind of uniform that said she'd learned to navigate corporate tech by not giving anyone anything to comment on. "Could ask you the same thing," Lucas said, pushing back from his desk. The chair squeaked, an embarrassing, drawn-out sound that echoed in the empty office. Everything in this building squeaked after a certain hour, like the place itself was protesting their presence. "Fair point." Claire glanced at her phone, and Lucas saw her expression shift, frustration, maybe annoyance. "My ride fell through. Alex was supposed to pick me up, but his kid's got a fever, so—" She waved a hand vaguely, the gesture encompassing the general chaos of other people's lives. Parenting wins, as it should. Alex worked in QA, had pictures of his kids all over his desk, talked about soccer practice and parent-teacher conferences, with the kind of weary affection that came from actually showing up. Lucas had met him maybe twice, exchanged maybe 10 sentences total. "You need a lift?" The offer came out before Lucas had fully thought it through, but Claire's expression shifted, something between relief and hesitation, and he realized she'd been trying to figure out how to ask without actually asking. Claire didn't like owing people. He'd noticed that in meetings, the way she deflected help, insisted on handling things herself, even when delegation would have been smarter. "I don't want to impose," she said, which Lucas had learned over the past 8 months working under her was Claire speak for, "Yes, please, I'm desperate, but I'll die before I admit it." "You're not. Come on. It's pouring out there." Lucas gestured toward the windows where rain was coming down in sheets, distorting the city lights into watercolor smears. "I'm not letting you wait for a rideshare that'll take 40 minutes and cost you $30. Claire's mouth quirked. Not quite a smile, but close. "When you put it that way." Lucas shut down his workstation, going through the familiar ritual of closing windows, saving work, logging out. He grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair, a worn canvas thing in olive green that had seen better years, fraying at the cuffs, a button missing on the left side. His mom had offered to replace it last Christmas, and he'd said no without really knowing why. Habit, maybe, or just the stubborn insistence on keeping things until they fell apart completely. He followed Claire to the elevator. The building was mostly empty now, just the night cleaning crew. He could hear a vacuum running somewhere on the second floor, and a couple of diehards in accounting who seemed to actually live here. There was a guy, Gerald or Gerard, who Lucas had seen leaving at midnight more than once, always with the same exhausted expression and coffee-stained shirt. The elevator descended with that particular mechanical whir of cables and pulleys, the slight lurch at each floor. Claire stood with her arms crossed, staring at the numbers as they ticked down. 3, 2, ground. "You get anywhere with that authentication bug?" she asked. Lucas shook his head. "It's slippery. I think it's a race condition, but I can't pin down the exact sequence. Might need fresh eyes tomorrow." "Want me to take a look?" "You've got your own workload." "Oh, Lucas, I'm the team lead. Your workload is my workload." "Then yeah, fresh eyes would help." The elevator opened onto the lobby. The security guard at the desk, Ramon, older guy who always had a crossword puzzle going, looked up and nodded. "Night, folks. Stay dry out there." "Not likely," Claire said, but she smiled at him, and Ramon smiled back. When they stepped outside, the rain hit them like a physical thing. Not the gentle Portland drizzle everyone joked about, the kind you could walk through without an umbrella and barely get wet, but actual rain, sheets of it, wind-driven and cold, the kind that found every gap in your clothes and reminded you that November in the Pacific Northwest didn't care about your plans or your comfort or anything else. It just was. "Jesus," Claire muttered, yanking her coat tighter around herself. It didn't help much. The rain was coming at an angle, hitting them from the side, soaking through fabric in seconds. "Cars this way." Lucas jogged toward the parking garage, half a block down, Claire keeping pace beside him. Her shoes, low heels, practical but still professional, clicked on the wet pavement, and he heard her swear again, softer this time, as she nearly slipped on a patch of standing water. By the time they reached his Honda, a 2015 Civic in dark blue that had been reliable if not exciting for the past 7 years, they were both soaked. Lucas's hair was plastered to his forehead, water running down his neck and into his collar. Claire looked like she'd been thrown in a pool, her coat darkened with water, her hair streaming. Lucas unlocked the doors, and they tumbled inside, breathing hard, the rain drumming on the roof like 1,000 impatient fingers. The sound was almost deafening in the enclosed space. And for a moment they just sat there, catching their breath, water dripping everywhere. "Sorry about the mess," Lucas said, reaching across to shove aside an empty coffee cup from the passenger seat, along with what might have been a granola bar wrapper and a receipt from the gas station. He tried to keep the car clean, really, but it had a way of accumulating debris, the evidence of a life spent mostly in transit between work and home, and not much else. "Lucas, I once found 3-week-old Chinese takeout in my back seat," Claire said, pulling her seatbelt across. "You're fine." She said it casually, but Lucas caught something in her tone, a kind of shared understanding of how life got away from you sometimes, how you meant to do better, and then just didn't. He appreciated that about Claire, the way she didn't pretend to have everything together. He started the engine. The heater kicked on, blasting cold air that would eventually warm up. His windshield was already fogging from the temperature difference, and he cranked the defrost, waited for it to clear. "Where to?" "Northwest, near Wallace Park. I'll navigate." Lucas pulled out of the garage and into traffic. It was lighter than usual for a Thursday night, but still sluggish, everyone driving cautious through the downpour. The windshield wipers worked double time, squeaking across the glass, barely keeping up. Rain hammered the hood, ran in rivers down the windows. Visibility was maybe 30 feet if he was lucky. Claire pulled out her phone, tapped at the screen. "Take a left at the next light. We'll skip Burnside. It's always a mess when it rains like this." "Got it." They drove in silence for a few minutes, the rain filling the space where conversation might have been. Lucas focused on the road, on keeping a safe distance from the car ahead. A Subaru with a cracked taillight and a bumper sticker he couldn't quite read through the rain. The traffic lights bled color across the wet pavement, red and green and amber, mixing into something almost pretty. "Thanks for this," Claire said after a while. Her voice was quieter than usual, almost tentative. Really? I know it's out of your way. It's fine. I live in Selwood, so it's not that far out of the way. A slight lie. Selwood was southeast and Wallace Park was northwest, which made it basically the opposite direction, but not so far that it mattered. Still, she was quiet for a moment, watching the rain streak across her window, her breath fogging the glass. You didn't have to stay late either, you know. The sprint review isn't until Thursday. You had time. Lucas shrugged, changed lanes to avoid a puddle that looked deep enough to be a problem. Wanted to get ahead of it. Besides, my apartment's not exactly calling me home. Roommate issues? No roommate. That's kind of the issue. Just me and a lot of quiet. He hadn't meant for it to come out that way. Raw, honest. But there it was. The truth he usually kept tucked away behind the polite fiction that he was fine. Everything was fine. Being alone was a choice, and not just what had happened when his last relationship had ended badly and he'd moved to Portland to start over. Claire made a sound that might have been understanding, soft enough that he almost missed it under the rain. I get that. Sometimes the silence is worse than the noise. Lucas glanced at her, caught off guard by the admission. Claire didn't usually do personal. At work, she was all business, sharp, focused, the kind of team lead who remembered everyone's birthdays and also made sure the code reviews didn't turn into bloodbaths. She mediated disputes, kept the meetings on track, pushed back on unrealistic deadlines from upper management. She was good at her job in a way that made it look easy, which Lucas knew meant it probably wasn't. But this, sitting in his car while rain pounded the roof and the heater hummed and the world outside blurred into watercolor, felt different. Less filtered, more real. You live alone? He asked. Yeah, divorced 3 years ago. He kept the house in Beaverton. I got the condo and my sanity. Even trade, all things considered. The way she said it was matter of fact, like she'd made peace with it. But Lucas heard the edge underneath. Divorce wasn't something you just got over, he figured. It was something you learned to carry. I'm sorry, he said, because it seemed like the thing to say. Don't be. It was the right call. We wanted different things. He wanted kids and a yard and a minivan. I wanted a career that didn't end at middle management and a life that wasn't defined by someone else's expectations. She paused. Turns out those things don't really compromise. No, I guess they don't. They drove in silence again, but it felt different now. Less awkward, more comfortable. Like they'd crossed some invisible line from coworkers who happened to be sharing a car ride to something else. Not friends exactly, but not strangers either. Claire directed him through side streets, avoiding the mess on Burnside like she'd promised. The neighborhood shifted from commercial to residential, the buildings getting shorter, trees appearing between the streetlights. The rain eased slightly, down to a heavy pour instead of a deluge, and Lucas eased up on the wipers. Turn left here, Claire said, and Lucas pulled onto a quiet street lined with old maples that had mostly lost their leaves. The pavement was carpeted with them, slick and dark under the streetlights. Well-kept houses sat back from the road, lights on in windows, the warm glow of people home from work, making dinner, living lives. Third house on the right, the blue one. Lucas pulled up to the curb, put the car in park. The porch light was on, illuminating a tidy front yard and a bike locked to the railing. Claire's condo, he guessed. A small house divided into units, hers probably upstairs based on the separate entrance. Nice neighborhood. The kind where people actually knew their neighbors, borrowed sugar, complained about the guy down the street who never mowed his lawn. Claire didn't move to get out. She sat there, hand on the door handle, staring at the house like she was trying to decide something. The engine idled. The wipers made one more pass across the windshield even though the rain had slowed enough that they squeaked. You okay? Lucas asked. Claire turned to look at him, and in the dim light from the dashboard he could see her face clearly. The tiredness, the hesitation, something else he couldn't quite name. I was going to make dinner, she said abruptly. Before Alex bailed. I've got ingredients for pasta, more than I can eat by myself. You hungry? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with more than just an invitation to eat. Lucas knew he should say no. Should thank her for the thought, keep it professional, drive home to his empty apartment in Selwood, and the leftover pizza in his fridge that was probably growing something by now. They were co-workers. She was his team lead. There were lines, unspoken rules about these things, and accepting an invitation to dinner at her place after dark crossed pretty much all of them. But the truth was, he was starving. The truth was the idea of sitting alone in his apartment with nothing but Netflix and the sound of his own breathing held zero appeal. The truth was he liked Claire, not just as a boss, but as a person, and the thought of spending more time with her away from the office and the roles they played there felt like something he wanted more than he should. "Yeah," he said, "I could eat." Claire's face did something complicated. Relief, maybe, mixed with something else Lucas couldn't read. Like she'd taken a risk and was surprised it had paid off. "Okay then," she said. "Come on." They made another dash through the rain, this time up Claire's front steps. The porch was small, barely enough room for both of them, and Lucas was suddenly very aware of how close they were standing, shoulders almost touching, both of them breathing hard from the short sprint. Claire fumbled with her keys, found the right one, jammed it in the lock. Come on," she muttered, and Lucas heard the frustration in her voice, the kind that came from a long day and too many small things going wrong. The key stuck. Claire swore, a word Lucas hadn't heard her use at work, and yanked it out, tried again. This time it turned and the door swung open. They spilled inside, dripping on the hardwood, and Claire immediately kicked the door shut behind them, leaning against it with a sigh. "Shoes off," she said, already towing off her own wet flats. "I've got towels in the bathroom. Hang on." She disappeared down a hallway, leaving Lucas standing in the entryway, taking in the space. It was small but well kept. Open floor plan, kitchen visible from the living room, furniture that looked comfortable rather than expensive. A couch in soft gray, worn in all the right places. A coffee table with a stack of books and a half-finished mug of something. Books on the shelves, a lot of them, spines cracked from actual reading. A framed photo on the mantel of Claire and an older woman who had the same sharp eyes and quick smile. No wedding photos. No trace of the ex-husband except maybe the empty space where those things used to be. The place felt lived in but not cluttered, organized but not sterile. It felt, Lucas thought, like Claire, practical and unpretentious and quietly comfortable with itself. Claire returned with towels, thick and dark blue. "Here, you're dripping on my floor." "Sorry." Lucas took the towel, dried his face, ran it through his hair. It didn't help much. His shirt was soaked through, clinging to his shoulders and back, cold and uncomfortable. Water had gotten down his collar and was now pooling somewhere around his lower back. "I might have something you can wear," Claire said, eyeing him with a critical expression that was pure team lead, assessing a problem, figuring out the solution. "My brother leaves stuff here sometimes when he visits. You're about his size, maybe a little taller." "You don't have to—" "Lucas, you're going to catch pneumonia, and then you'll miss the sprint review, and I'll have to explain why my senior engineer is out sick because I let him drive home in wet clothes. Just let me help." She vanished down to the hallway again before he could argue, and Lucas stood there feeling awkward and out of place in a way he hadn't since, college? That party where he'd shown up not knowing anyone and spent the whole night nursing one beer in a corner? Claire came back with clothes, a faded Oregon State sweatshirt in orange and black, soft from 100 washes, and a pair of gym shorts that had definitely seen better days. "Bathroom's down the hall, first door on the left." Lucas changed quickly, bundling his wet clothes into a pile he wasn't sure what to do with. The sweatshirt was comfortable, worn in, and smelled faintly of laundry detergent. Something clean and simple, not floral. The shorts were too short, hitting him mid-thigh, but they were dry, and that was what mattered. When he came back out, Claire had changed too. Black yoga pants and an oversized flannel shirt in red and black plaid, the sleeves rolled up to her elbows. Her hair was down completely now, still damp, hanging just past her shoulders. She looked younger without the office armor, less guarded. More like someone he might have met at a coffee shop or a bookstore. Someone he might have talked to without the weight of hierarchy between them. "Better?" she asked, glancing up from where she was pulling things out of the fridge. "Yeah, thanks." "Good. Now make yourself useful and open that wine." She nodded towards a bottle of red on the counter, something Italian, the label worn enough that it had probably been sitting there a while. "Corkscrews in the drawer by the sink." Lucas found the corkscrew, one of those waiter-style ones that required actual technique, and wrestled with the bottle. The cork was dry, stubborn, and he had to work at it, twisting and pulling until it finally came free with a soft pop. He poured wine into the 2 glasses Claire had set out, filled them maybe a third of the way, trying to remember if that was the right amount or if that was just something he'd seen in movies. Claire took a sip, hummed approval. Not bad. I was worried it might have turned. How long have you had it? My brother brought it last time he visited. So 4 months? 5? I don't drink much on my own. She set the glass aside and started pulling ingredients from the fridge. A carton of eggs, a block of Parmesan, pancetta wrapped in deli paper. From the counter, garlic and a box of spaghetti. From the cupboard, olive oil and black pepper. You like carbonara? She asked. I like anything I don't have to make myself. Claire laughed, and it was a good sound. Loose, genuine, the kind of laugh that came from the chest and not just the throat. Low bar. I can work with that. She moved around the kitchen with the ease of someone who actually knew how to cook, not just heat things up or follow recipes with paranoid precision. She filled a pot with water, set it on the stove to boil, then started on the garlic, peeling it with her fingers, crushing it under the flat of a knife, mincing it with quick, confident cuts. You cook a lot? Lucas asked, leaning against the counter, sipping wine. It's meditative. I like the process. The measuring, the timing, the way everything has to come together in the right order or it doesn't work. She scraped the garlic into a pan with olive oil, turned the heat on low. The sizzle filled the kitchen, followed by the smell, sharp and warm and immediate. It's like coding, but you can eat the result. And it won't crash in production. Exactly. Claire glanced at him, smiled. You cook it all? I make a mean grilled cheese. Beyond that, it's mostly takeout and cereal. Tragic. I'll have to fix that. It was a throwaway comment, the kind of thing people said without meaning it, but something about the way Claire said it made Lucas pause. Like maybe she did mean it. Like maybe this standing in her kitchen, drinking wine, watching her cook, wasn't just a one-time thing born of rain and circumstance and a ride home that had turned into something else. He didn't let himself think about that too hard. Instead, he watched as Claire worked, adding the diced pancetta to the pan, letting it render and crisp. The kitchen filled with the smell of it, salty and rich. She stirred occasionally, her movements economical, practiced. So what does your brother do? Lucas asked, partly to fill the silence and partly because he was genuinely curious about the person whose clothes he was wearing. He's a teacher, 3rd grade. Down in Eugene, same school we went to as kids. Claire cracked eggs into a bowl, added grated Parmesan, whisked it together. He's good at it. Patient in a way I never learned to be. Kids love him. You close? Close enough. We talk maybe once a week, see each other every couple months. He's got his life down there. I've got mine up here. She paused, tasted the egg mixture, added more cheese. It works. The water came to a boil and Claire added the pasta, a whole box, more than they needed, but she didn't seem to care about precision here. She set a timer on her phone, went back to the pancetta. Lucas sipped his wine and watched, offering occasional commentary that made Claire roll her eyes and smile. The rain kept falling outside, softer now, a steady background rhythm that made the inside feel warmer by contrast. It occurred to Lucas that this was the most relaxed he'd felt in weeks. No deadlines, no tickets to close, no code to review. Just this. Just being here with someone who felt familiar even though they barely knew each other outside of work. When the timer went off, Claire drained the pasta and tossed it with the pancetta and garlic, then killed the heat and added the egg mixture, stirring constantly so it wouldn't scramble. The sauce came together, coating each strand of pasta in something creamy and rich. She plated it quickly, added a crack of black pepper to each dish, and carried both to the small dining table by the window. They sat across from each other, and for a moment it felt oddly formal, like a first date neither of them had agreed to. Lucas picked up his fork, then put it down, suddenly unsure of how this worked. Then Claire picked up her own fork, twirled pasta, and said, "If this is terrible, blame the recipe, not me." And the tension broke. It wasn't terrible. It was good, rich and creamy, the egg coating each strand of pasta perfectly, the pancetta giving it saltiness and bite, the garlic and pepper cutting through with just enough sharpness to keep it interesting. "This is amazing," Lucas said, and meant it. "Don't sound so surprised." "I'm not. I'm just—" He paused, searching for words. "I'm realizing I don't know much about you, outside of work. Claire's expression shifted, something cautious sliding into place. She set down her fork, took a sip of wine. You know the important stuff. I'm good at my job, I don't tolerate office politics, and I take my coffee black with 1 sugar. That's not knowing you. That's knowing your resume. Maybe that's all there is. I don't believe that. Claire studied him across the table, her eyes dark in the low light. The silence stretched long enough to be uncomfortable, and Lucas wondered if he'd pushed too far, crossed a line that was easier to pretend didn't exist. He was about to backtrack, to make some joke and diffuse the moment, when Claire spoke. I grew up in Eugene, she said quietly. My dad taught high school English, Shakespeare and Steinbeck and all those dead white guys he loved more than was probably healthy. My mom was a nurse at Sacred Heart, worked night shifts for most of my childhood, so it was usually just me and my brother and my dad at dinner talking about books I was too young to understand. I have one brother, the one whose clothes you're wearing. His name's Michael. He's 2 years younger than me and somehow turned out to be the well-adjusted one. She paused, took another sip of wine. Lucas stayed quiet, sensing she wasn't done. I got married at 24 because it seemed like the thing to do. Met him in college, dated for 3 years, and everyone said we were perfect together. Maybe we were, for a while. But perfect doesn't mean right. We got divorced at 29 because I finally admitted we wanted different things. He wanted a family. I wanted a career that didn't end when the kids came along. We fought about it for 2 years before we finally called it. That must have been hard. It was. But so was staying. Claire picked up her fork again, pushed pasta around her plate. I took this job because I was tired of being the only woman in the room who had to prove she belonged. Tired of being talked over in meetings, tired of having my ideas credited to whoever repeated them louder. Portland Tech isn't perfect, but it's better than where I was. Where were you before? Bay Area, tech startup. That thought ping pong tables and beer on tap made up for the fact that they worked us 80 hours a week and paid us an equity that never vested. She smiled, but it was bitter. I burned out hard. Spent 3 months on my brother's couch in Eugene trying to remember why I'd wanted to do this in the first place. Lucas absorbed this, the pieces of Claire's life clicking into place like a puzzle he hadn't known he was solving. Did you figure it out? Sort of. I figured out I still liked the work, when it wasn't being weaponized to grind me down. I like solving problems. I like building things that work. But I also figured out I needed boundaries. So I moved here, took a job that had actual work-life balance, and tried to build a life that wasn't just my career. How's that going? Claire laughed, and this time it was self-deprecating. Well, I'm eating dinner alone most nights, and I haven't invited anyone over in 8 months, so you tell me. Why me? Lucas asked. The question came out before he could stop it, direct and maybe too honest. Why tonight? Claire was quiet for a long moment, and Lucas thought she might not answer. Then she said, maybe because you stayed late when you didn't have to. Maybe because you offered me a ride without making it weird. Maybe because I'm tired of eating alone and you seemed like someone who might understand that. The honesty hit Lucas harder than he expected. He thought about his own apartment, the silence Claire had understood without him having to explain, the way he'd been filling his evenings with work because it was easier than admitting he was lonely. Me too, he said quietly. Claire's eyes met his across the table, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. The acknowledgement that they were both just people trying to get through the day, and sometimes that meant accepting help from unexpected places. Sometimes it meant taking a risk on someone you barely knew because the alternative was going home alone to a quiet apartment and the weight of your own thoughts. They finished dinner, the conversation drifting to safer topics. Favorite books, terrible movies they'd watched too many times, places they wanted to travel but probably never would. Claire refused Lucas's offer to help with dishes, so he wandered to the bookshelf while she cleaned up, the sound of running water and clinking plates a comfortable backdrop. The collection was eclectic. Thrillers mixed with literary fiction, a whole shelf of sci-fi, some poetry wedged in between. He pulled out a worn copy of The Left Hand of Darkness and found notes in the margins, small observations in Claire's neat handwriting, questions about gender and identity, underlined passages about what it meant to be human. You actually annotate, he said when Claire joined him, drying her hands on a towel. Only the ones worth keeping. She took the book from him, flipped through it with the careful touch of someone who loved books as objects, not just vessels for stories. I read this in college. It's about a lot of things, but mostly about what happens when you stop seeing people through the lens of what you expect them to be. Heavy stuff for a Thursday night. Every night's a Thursday if you think about it hard enough. Claire slid the book back onto the shelf, her fingers lingering on the spine. You want more wine? They ended up on the couch, the second bottle of wine open between them, rain still falling outside, but quieter now, less urgent. The conversation drifted again. Childhood stories, college disasters, the strange paths that had led them both to Portland and software engineering, and this moment, sitting on her couch in borrowed clothes while the world outside went about its business. Claire told him about Berkeley, about burning out in Silicon Valley before she was 30, about moving north looking for a pace that didn't require sacrificing her entire life at the altar of productivity. Lucas told her about University of Washington, about graduating into a recession and taking whatever work he could find, about contracts that ended badly, and jobs that paid the bills but didn't pay attention to whether he was happy. Do you like it? Claire asked, tucking her feet under her on the couch, cradling her wine glass. The work, I mean, not just the paycheck. Lucas considered. It was a harder question than it should have been. Most days, I like solving problems, building things that work. There's something satisfying about taking a mess of requirements and turning it into something functional, something people can actually use. But sometimes I wonder if I'm just filling time, like, is this it? 40 years of staring at screens and attending meetings and shipping features nobody really needs, and then I retire and try to remember what I actually enjoyed doing. That's bleak. That's honest. Claire was quiet, turning her wine glass in her hands. I used to think if I just worked hard enough, proved myself enough, I'd reach some point where it felt like I'd made it. Like there'd be this moment where I could stop and say, okay, this is enough. I've done enough. But the goalposts keep moving. There's always another promotion, another project, another thing to prove. And meanwhile, life's just happening without me. So why keep doing it? Because I'm good at it. Because it pays the bills. Because I don't know what else I'd do. She looked at him, and there was something vulnerable in her expression, like she was admitting something she hadn't said out loud before. Why do you? Lucas didn't have a good answer. He drank wine instead, let the question hang in the air between them. Outside, the rain picked up again, a sudden rush of water against the windows, and they both turned to look. The street was empty, slick and dark, the parked cars glistening under the streetlights. Claire glanced at the clock on the wall, nearly 11, and made a face. I should let you go. You've probably got things to do tomorrow. Lucas should have agreed, should have thanked her for dinner and the wine and the conversation, grabbed his still damp clothes from wherever she'd put them, and headed home. But the apartment waiting for him held nothing but quiet and his own thoughts, and sitting here with Claire, talking about things that mattered and things that didn't, felt better than anything he'd done in months. I don't, he said. Have things to do, I mean. Tomorrow's Friday. I'm mostly caught up on my tickets, and honestly, this beats going home to an empty apartment and leftover pizza that's probably growing something by now. Claire's expression softened and she smiled, not the polite smile she used at work, but something real. Yeah? Yeah? She was quiet for a moment and Lucas could see her thinking, weighing something. Then she said, You could stay. The words landed between them, heavy with implication. Lucas's pulse kicked up and he tried to read her face, figure out what she meant. Stay for another drink? Stay the night? Stay and see what happened when two people stopped pretending they didn't feel the pull between them, the thing that had been building all evening in the space between words and glances and accidental touches? Claire. On the couch, she added quickly, and Lucas couldn't tell if she sounded relieved or disappointed. I mean, it's late, you've had wine, the rain's not stopping. I have extra blankets. It's practical. It wasn't practical. They both knew that. It was risky and complicated and crossed every professional boundary that existed between them. But Lucas found himself nodding anyway, because the alternative, driving home through the rain alone, pretending this evening hadn't meant anything, felt impossible now. Okay, he said. If you're sure. I'm sure. Claire got up, disappeared into a closet, and returned with blankets and a pillow. She handed them to Lucas, and their fingers brushed, just for a second, just enough for him to feel the warmth of her skin, and neither of them pulled away immediately. They stood there, close enough that Lucas could smell her shampoo, something faintly floral, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "Bathroom's down the hall if you need it," Claire said, her voice quieter than before. "I'll be in my room if you need anything." "Thanks. For dinner. For this. For—" He gestured vaguely, trying to encompass everything and nothing. "Thank you for the ride. For staying." She hesitated, like there was more she wanted to say but couldn't find the words, or maybe found them but couldn't bring herself to say them out loud. Then she smiled, small, uncertain, real, and headed down the hallway. Lucas heard a door close, soft but definite. He stood there for a moment holding the blankets, his heart doing something complicated in his chest that he refused to examine too closely. Then he set up the couch, spreading out the blankets, fluffing the pillow, going through the motions, and changed back into his mostly dry clothes because sleeping in someone else's brother's shorts felt like a step too far into territory he wasn't ready to navigate. He lay down in the dark, staring at the ceiling. The couch was comfortable, more comfortable than his own, actually, which said something about the state of his furniture. The rain was steady, rhythmic. And Lucas lay there, knowing sleep wasn't coming anytime soon, his mind too full of the evening, of Claire, of the weight of small choices that somehow felt enormous. He thought about Monday, when they'd both be back at the office, and this would look like something it wasn't. Team lead and her report, alone at her place overnight. It didn't matter that nothing had happened. People would talk. They always talked. And Claire had worked too hard, fought too many battles, to have her professionalism questioned because she'd offered someone a ride home in the rain. He should care about that more than he did. Should be thinking about exit strategies, about how to keep this quiet, about damage control. But all he could think about was the way Claire had looked at him over dinner, the things she'd said, the careful distance she'd maintained even while inviting him to stay. Somewhere around midnight, Lucas heard movement, soft footsteps in the hallway, the creak of a floorboard that hadn't made a sound when she'd walked on it earlier. He stayed still, eyes closed, breathing even. The footsteps stopped near the couch. He could feel Claire standing there, watching him, though he couldn't say how he knew. Maybe the change in air pressure. Maybe something else. He didn't know what she was thinking. Didn't know if she'd changed her mind, or if she was just making sure he had everything he needed, or if she was wrestling with the same thoughts keeping him awake. The awareness that something had shifted tonight, that they'd crossed a line that was easier to pretend didn't exist. After what felt like forever but was probably only a minute, maybe less, she left. Lucas heard the footsteps retreat, heard a door close again, softer this time. He opened his eyes, stared at the shadows on the ceiling cast by the streetlight through the window. The rain kept falling, and somewhere in the space between what had happened and what might happen next, in the quiet of Claire's living room at midnight, everything changed. Lucas just didn't know it yet. But he would. Lucas woke to the smell of coffee and the muted gray light of morning filtering through unfamiliar windows. For a disoriented moment, he couldn't place where he was. The couch was wrong, the ceiling was wrong, the sounds were all wrong, and then it came back in a rush. Claire's place. The rain. Dinner and wine and a conversation that had gone deeper than either of them had probably intended. He sat up slowly, his neck protesting from the angle he'd slept at. The blankets had twisted around him sometime in the night, and his shirt, still slightly damp from yesterday, was wrinkled beyond redemption. The living room looked different in daylight, less intimate somehow, just a regular space with regular furniture and regular problems like a water stain on the ceiling that someone probably kept meaning to fix. From the kitchen came the sound of cabinets opening, the clink of dishes. Lucas ran a hand through his hair, tried to make himself presentable, then gave up and padded toward the kitchen in his bare feet. Claire stood at the counter, already dressed for work in dark jeans and a gray sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She was pouring coffee into 2 mugs, and she glanced up when he appeared in the doorway. "Morning," she said. Her voice was careful, measured, like she was trying to figure out how this worked too. "Morning." Lucas gestured at the coffee pot. "You didn't have to. I was making it anyway. There's milk in the fridge if you need it. Sugar's in the—" "Black's fine." Claire handed him a mug, and their fingers didn't touch this time. She'd made sure of it. Lucas noticed but didn't comment. They stood in the kitchen drinking coffee in silence that felt nothing like last night's comfortable quiet. This was awkward, strained, both of them hyper-aware that daylight changed things. That they had to go back to the office on Monday and pretend this hadn't happened, or figure out how to acknowledge it had without making it weird. "I should get going," Lucas said finally. "Let you have your Friday." "Right, yeah." Claire set her mug down, crossed her arms. "Your clothes are in the dryer. I threw them in last night after you fell asleep. They should be dry by now." "You didn't have to do that." "I know." Lucas went to the small laundry closet off the kitchen, found his clothes folded in a neat pile on top of the dryer. The gesture felt almost painfully domestic, and he tried not to think about what it meant that Claire had done this while he slept. He changed quickly in the bathroom, emerged feeling more like himself even if the shirt still looked like he'd slept in it. When he came back, Claire was at the sink, rinsing out her coffee mug with more attention than the task required. "Thanks," Lucas said. "For everything, the ride home, dinner, the couch, all of it." Claire turned, leaned against the counter. "It was nice. Having company." "Yeah, it was." They looked at each other across the kitchen, and Lucas felt the weight of everything unsaid pressing down between them. He should leave, should get in his car and drive home and let Friday happen like any other Friday. But something kept him there, standing in Claire's kitchen in yesterday's wrinkled clothes, trying to figure out if what he wanted to say was worth the risk of saying it. "Claire, we should probably talk about this," she said at the same time. They both stopped. Lucas gestured for her to continue. Claire took a breath, let it out slowly. "Look, I like you. I think that's obvious at this point. And last night was great, but we both know this is complicated. I'm your team lead. There are rules, expectations. HR would have a field day if they found out you stayed here." "Nothing happened," Lucas said. "I know, but that's not how it'll look if people find out. And people always find out." She rubbed her forehead, and Lucas saw the tiredness there, the weight of experience. "I've seen how this goes. The woman gets labeled unprofessional, sleeping her way through the team. The guy gets high fives and knowing looks. It's not fair, but it's how it is." Lucas wanted to argue, to say it would be different, but he knew she was right. He'd seen it happen at his last job. A manager and one of her reports had gotten involved, tried to keep it quiet, and when it came out, the fallout had been brutal. She'd ended up transferring to a different department. He'd quit. "So what do we do?" he asked. "We go to work on Monday, and we're professional. We keep this separate. What happened here stays here." "And if it happens again?" Claire's expression flickered. Surprise, maybe, or hope she was trying to suppress. "Does it need to?" "I don't know. Maybe." Lucas set his coffee mug down, met her eyes. "I'm not good at pretending I don't feel things." "Then you're going to have a rough time in corporate America." "I'm serious, Claire." "So am I." She pushed off from the counter, closed some of the distance between them, but not all of it. "Lucas, I like my job. I worked hard to get here, and I'm not going to throw it away because we had one good night. If this is going to be anything, we need to be smart about it. Careful." "What if I don't want to be careful? Then you're an idiot, and I'm not dating idiots." The word hung there between them. Dating. Not just attraction, not just possibility, but the actual shape of what this could be. Lucas felt something shift in his chest, something that felt dangerously close to hope. "So we're dating?" "I didn't say that." "You kind of did." Claire's mouth twitched, fighting a smile. "Fine, we're potentially dating, in a careful, professional, nobody finds out kind of way. Until we figure out if this is actually something or just what?" "I don't know. Proximity? Loneliness? Two people who happen to be in the right place at the wrong time?" Lucas stepped closer, close enough to see the uncertainty in her eyes, the way she was trying to protect herself by naming all the ways this could go wrong. "What if it's none of those things?" "Then we're in trouble." "Yeah," Lucas said quietly, "we are." They stood there, inches apart, and Lucas thought about kissing her, about closing that last bit of distance and seeing what happened when they stopped talking and just acted. But Claire was right. They needed to be smart about this. Careful. So instead he stepped back, picked up his coffee, and tried to ignore the disappointment on her face that mirrored his own. "I should go," he said. "Yeah. Okay." Lucas headed for the door, pulled on his shoes. Claire followed, hands shoved in her pockets, watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "See you Monday," she said. See you Monday. He walked to his car in the cool morning air, got in, sat there for a moment before starting the engine. When he glanced back, Claire was standing in the doorway, and their eyes met one more time before she stepped inside and closed the door. Lucas drove home thinking about what the hell he'd just gotten himself into. Monday came too fast and not fast enough. Lucas spent the weekend trying to focus on anything other than Claire. Ran errands, cleaned his apartment, tried to read a book that couldn't hold his attention. He kept picking up his phone to text her, then putting it down. They hadn't exchanged numbers. It felt deliberate, like a boundary neither of them wanted to acknowledge they'd drawn. When he walked into the office Monday morning, Claire was already at her desk, focused on her laptop, looking every inch the professional team lead in a navy blouse and her usual dark jeans. She glanced up when Lucas passed, gave him the same quick smile she gave everyone, and went back to work. Lucas sat at his desk and tried to do the same. The morning passed in a blur of emails and code reviews. At 10, they had their daily stand-up. The whole team gathered around the whiteboard while Claire ran through everyone's updates and blockers. Lucas gave his status, made eye contact with Claire for maybe 2 seconds, and felt the weight of Friday night sitting between them like a third person nobody else could see. If anyone noticed anything different, they didn't say. Marcus asked about the authentication bug. Sarah mentioned she was blocked on a database issue. Jake made a joke about the coffee machine being broken again. Normal. Everything was completely normal, except it wasn't. Lucas caught Claire looking at him twice during the meeting. Both times she looked away quickly, refocused on whoever was talking. Both times Lucas felt that pull, that awareness that made it hard to concentrate on anything else. After stand-up, people dispersed back to their desks. Lucas was heading to the break room for more coffee when Claire caught up with him in the hallway. "Got a minute?" she said, all business. "Sure." They walked to one of the small conference rooms and Claire closed the door behind them. The room was glass-walled, visible to anyone walking by, but the door muffled sound. "We need to establish some ground rules," Claire said without preamble. "Okay. At work, we're colleagues, that's it. No special treatment, no inside jokes, no looks across the room that make people wonder. We keep this completely separate." "Agreed." If anyone asks if something's going on, the answer is no. Even though that's a lie. Especially because it's a lie. Claire crossed her arms, and Lucas recognized the defensive posture. "Look, I've been thinking about this all weekend. If we're going to try this, we need to be realistic. Office relationships are a minefield even when there's no power dynamic involved. With me being your lead, it's worse." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying we need to be careful. More than careful. We need to be invisible." She paused. "And if at any point this starts affecting work, if people start talking, if it gets complicated, we end it. Clean break. No drama." Lucas absorbed this, the rules she was laying down like armor against whatever this thing between them was. Part of him wanted to push back, to say it didn't have to be this clinical, this controlled, but he understood where she was coming from. Claire had more to lose than he did. She'd worked harder to get here, fought more battles. He wasn't going to be the reason she lost ground. "Okay," he said. "We keep it separate. We're careful. And if it doesn't work, we walk away. Clean break." "Clean break." Claire nodded, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "Good. Then we're on the same page." "Are we still—" Lucas gestured vaguely, trying to find words for what they were doing. "I mean, outside of work?" "I don't know. Maybe?" She looked at him, and for a second the professional mask slipped. "Can we just see how it goes? Without trying to define it?" "Yeah, we can do that." Someone walked past the conference room, glanced in, kept going. Claire stepped back, put more distance between them. "I should get back," she said. "Claire." She stopped at the door, hand on the handle. "Friday was real," Lucas said. "Whatever this is, that was real." Claire's expression softened, just for a moment. "I know." Then she was gone, and Lucas was left standing in the empty conference room wondering how you were supposed to act normal when everything had changed. The week crawled by. Lucas threw himself into work. The authentication bug, a new feature request, code reviews that required actual concentration. He kept his head down, stayed in his lane, and tried not to look at Claire more than was strictly professional. It was harder than he'd expected. Every meeting felt loaded with subtext. Every time Claire gave feedback on his code, Lucas had to remind himself she was just doing her job, not commenting on anything else. When she asked him to stay late Wednesday to help debug a production issue, they worked side by side for 3 hours without once mentioning Friday night, and the effort of not talking about it felt like its own kind of conversation. By Thursday, Lucas was exhausted from the constant vigilance. He grabbed lunch at his desk, ate while reviewing pull requests, and tried to ignore the fact that he was doing exactly what he'd complained about on Friday, filling time with work because it was easier than dealing with everything else. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You free Saturday?" Lucas stared at it for a long moment before responding. "Who is this?" "Very funny. It's Claire. Got your number from the employee directory. Don't make me regret this." Lucas felt something loosen in his chest, tension he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. "Depends. What did you have in mind?" The response came quickly. "Hiking, Wallace Falls. Unless you're one of those people who thinks a walk around the block counts as exercise. I can keep up. We'll see. Pick you up at 8. Don't be late." Lucas smiled at his phone, typed back a response, then deleted it and tried again. Settled on, "See you then." He spent the rest of Thursday and all of Friday trying not to think about Saturday, which meant he thought about almost nothing else. He cleaned his apartment, actually cleaned it, not just the surface straightening he usually did. He went through his hiking gear, made sure his boots were broken in, packed a backpack with water and snacks like he was preparing for an expedition instead of a day hike, an hour outside the city. Friday afternoon, Marcus stopped by his desk with a question about the sprint retrospective, and Lucas answered on autopilot, his mind already somewhere else. "You okay, man?" Marcus asked. "You seem distracted." "Yeah, fine, just tired." "Tell me about it." "This sprint's been brutal." Marcus leaned against the desk, settling in for conversation Lucas really didn't want to have. "Hey, you doing anything this weekend? A bunch of us are hitting that new brewery in Alberta. You should come." "Can't. I've got plans." "Hot date?" Marcus grinned, clearly joking. "Something like that." The words were out before Lucas could stop them, and Marcus's eyebrows shot up. "Seriously? Good for you. Anyone I know?" "No," Lucas said quickly, too quickly. "Just someone I met. It's new." "Well, good luck with it." Marcus pushed off the desk, started to leave, then turned back. "Hey, have you noticed Claire's been weird lately?" Lucas's heart kicked into a higher gear. "Weird how?" "I don't know, just off. Like she's distracted or something. Not in a bad way, just different." Marcus shrugged. "Probably nothing. Maybe she's just stressed." "Yeah, probably." Marcus left, and Lucas sat there feeling the first stirrings of anxiety. If Marcus had noticed something was different with Claire, how long before other people started paying attention? Before the whispers started, the speculation? He pulled out his phone, typed a message to Claire. "People are starting to notice you're distracted." Her response came a minute later. "Are they noticing you're distracted?" Marcus asked if I had weekend plans. "I said I had a date." "Did you tell him who?" "No." "But I'm not good at lying, then we'll have to be more careful." Lucas stared at the message, at the careful wall she kept putting up between them and anything that felt real. He typed back, "Is that what Saturday is? Being careful?" The response took longer this time. "Saturday is us figuring out if this is worth the risk." "Fair enough?" "Fair enough." Lucas went home that night feeling like he was standing on the edge of something he couldn't see clearly. Like one more step would either be solid ground or empty air, and he wouldn't know which until he took it. Saturday morning came cold and clear, the kind of October day that promised rain later but gave you a few hours of sharp sunlight first. Lucas was ready by 7:30, waiting by the window like a teenager on prom night, and when Claire's car pulled up at exactly 8, he felt something settle in his chest. Anticipation, nervousness, hope. He locked up and jogged down to meet her. She was driving a Subaru Outback. Of course she was. Everyone in Portland had a Subaru. And she looked different out of work clothes. Hiking pants, a fleece jacket in dark green, her hair in a braid, no makeup, no armor. Just Claire. "Morning," she said when he got in. "Morning." They pulled away from the curb, and for the first few minutes neither of them spoke. Then Claire said, "You actually look like you know what you're doing. I was worried I'd have to babysit you up the trail." "I grew up in Washington. I know how to walk uphill." "We'll see." The drive took about 90 minutes, heading east out of the city and into the Cascades. They talked about easy things: music, podcasts, the ridiculous price of gas. Nothing heavy, nothing that required them to acknowledge what they were doing or why. Just two people in a car on a Saturday morning, heading into the mountains. The trailhead parking lot was half full when they arrived. Claire grabbed her pack from the back, and they set off up the trail in comfortable silence. The path climbed steadily through old-growth forest, the air thick with the smell of cedar and wet earth. Moss covered everything: trees, rocks, the ground itself, making the whole world look soft and ancient. Lucas fell into the rhythm of it easily, his breathing steady, legs finding the pace. Claire moved ahead of him, setting a brisk clip that suggested she did this regularly. Not showing off, just comfortable in her body and what it could do. They'd been hiking for maybe 40 minutes when Claire finally spoke. "So, we should probably talk." "I thought that's what we were doing." "I meant talk. About this. Us." Lucas waited, letting her find the words. "I haven't done this in a while," Claire said, not looking back. "The dating thing, and I've definitely never done it with someone I work with. So I'm kind of making this up as I go." "That makes two of us." "The thing is, I like you, more than I probably should given the circumstances. And Friday night felt like something real, not just loneliness or convenience or whatever I tried to convince myself it was." She paused at a switchback, finally turning to face him. "But I'm also terrified this is going to blow up in my face." "So why are we here?" "Because I'm tired of being scared of everything. Because you make me laugh and you're good at what you do, and you don't treat me like I'm fragile or difficult or any of the other things men have called me when I wouldn't make myself smaller for them." She took a breath. "And because when I'm around you, I feel like maybe there's more to life than just getting through the week." Lucas climbed the last few steps to where she stood. They were at a viewpoint now, the valley spreading out below them, gray and green and endless. "I don't have a lot of experience with this either," he said. "Relationships, I mean. My last one ended badly, and I spent the last year telling myself I was better off alone. But I don't feel better off. I feel lonely. And then I met you, and suddenly lonely felt like something I could actually fix." "I'm not a fix, Lucas." "I know. That came out wrong." He tried again. "What I mean is, you make me want to try, to show up for something other than work, to be part of someone else's life instead of just occupying space in my own." Claire looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Then she reached out and took his hand, and the gesture felt both casual and monumental. "Okay," she said. "Let's try." They hiked the rest of the way hand in hand when the trail was wide enough, breaking apart when it narrowed or got steep. They reached the falls around noon, 3 tiers of water cascading down dark rock, mist rising where it hit the pool below. There were other people there, families with kids, a group of college students taking selfies, but it felt like they had their own space carved out somehow. They ate lunch sitting on a flat rock, sandwiches Claire had packed, and talked about nothing important. Movies they'd seen, places they'd grown up, the specific way Portland rain was different from Seattle rain. Easy conversation that filled the space without demanding anything. On the hike back down, Claire told him about her marriage. The real version, not the sanitized one she'd given him Friday night. About how she'd known it was wrong even before the wedding, but she'd been too proud to call it off. About the fights that got worse and more frequent until they were barely speaking except to hurt each other. About the relief she'd felt when it finally ended, mixed with the shame of failing at something everyone else seemed to make work. Lucas told her about his last girlfriend, the one who'd cheated on him with his roommate, the one who'd made him feel small and stupid for caring about things like fidelity and honesty. About moving to Portland to start over and realizing he had no idea who he was without someone else defining him. By the time they got back to the car, something had shifted between them. Not solved, not figured out, but acknowledged. They were both carrying damage. They were both scared of getting it wrong again, and they were both willing to try anyway. Claire drove him home through the late afternoon light, and when she pulled up in front of his building, Lucas didn't want to get out. "You want to come up?" he asked. "I make a terrible dinner, but I've got beer and decent Wi-Fi." Claire smiled. "I've got an early meeting Monday. I should probably get home, get some sleep." "Right, yeah." He started to open the door, and Claire caught his arm. "Lucas, I had a really good time today." "Me too." She leaned across the console and kissed him, quick and soft, and then pulled back before he could react. "See you Monday," she said. Lucas got out, watched her drive away, and stood on the sidewalk feeling like the world had tilted slightly on its axis. Then he went upstairs to his empty apartment and realized it didn't feel quite so empty anymore. Monday came, and they were professional. Tuesday, the same. By Wednesday, Lucas thought they might actually pull this off, the careful dance of keeping work and everything else separate, of being colleagues in public, and something else entirely in private. Then Thursday afternoon, everything started to unravel. Lucas was in the break room, refilling his coffee, when he heard Sarah and Jake talking near the vending machine. He wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but his name caught his attention. "I'm just saying, have you noticed how much time Claire spends at Lucas's desk lately?" Sarah said, her voice low but not low enough. "She's the team lead. That's literally her job." "Yeah, but it's different, the way she looks at him." Lucas froze, coffee pot in hand. "You're reading into things," Jake said, but he didn't sound entirely convinced. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just paying attention." Sarah lowered her voice even more, and Lucas had to strain to hear. "Remember last week when they both left early on the same day? And that conference room conversation that went on for like 20 minutes with the door closed? So what, you think they're hooking up?" "I don't know, but something's going on." Lucas set the coffee pot down carefully, his hands suddenly unsteady. He walked out of the break room without his coffee, past Sarah and Jake, who stopped talking the second they saw him. He made it back to his desk, sat down, and stared at his screen without seeing it. His phone buzzed, a text from Claire. "Can you come to my office?" "Now." Lucas stood on shaky legs and walked across the floor to Claire's office. She was at her desk, door open, looking completely normal except for the tension in her shoulders that Lucas had learned to recognize. "Close the door," she said when he entered. He did. "People are talking," Claire said without preamble. "I just had Marcus ask me point blank if there was something going on between us." Lucas's stomach dropped. "What did you say?" "I said no, but I don't think he believed me." She looked up at him, and there was fear in her eyes, real fear. "This is exactly what I was worried about. We've been so careful, but people notice things. They put pieces together." "So what do we do?" "I don't know." Claire stood, paced to the window, back again. "Maybe we need to take a step back. Put some actual distance between us for a while. Let things cool down." "Is that what you want?" "What I want doesn't matter. What matters is protecting both of our careers." Lucas felt something cold settle in his chest. "So you're ending this?" "I'm saying we need to be smart. Smart or scared?" "Don't," Claire said sharply. "Don't make this about courage. You don't have as much to lose as I do. You're not the one who will be called unprofessional, who'll have every decision questioned, every promotion scrutinized. So don't tell me I'm scared when I'm just being realistic." The words hit harder than Lucas expected, partly because they were true. He didn't have as much to lose. He could walk away from this job if he had to and find another. Claire had built something here, invested years. It wasn't the same. "You're right," he said quietly. "I'm sorry." Claire's shoulders sagged. "No, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have snapped. I'm just..." She ran a hand over her face. "I knew this would get complicated. I knew it, and I did it anyway." "Do you regret it?" She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Lucas saw all the conflict written across her face. "No. That's the problem. I don't regret it at all." They stood there in her office, with the door closed and the whole floor potentially watching, and Lucas didn't know what to say to make this better. Didn't know if there was anything to say. "Let's just get through the rest of the week," Claire said finally. "We'll figure out the rest later." Lucas nodded and left, and for the first time since Friday night, he wondered if maybe they'd been kidding themselves all along, if maybe some lines existed for a reason, and crossing them always ended the same way. The rest of Thursday passed in a fog. Lucas kept his head down, avoided the break room, and left at exactly 5 without saying goodbye to anyone. He drove home on autopilot, made it to his apartment, and sat on his couch staring at nothing until his phone buzzed sometime after 7. Claire's name lit up the screen. "I'm outside." Lucas went to the window, pulled back the curtain. Claire's Subaru was parked on the street below, engine running, headlights cutting through the early darkness. He grabbed his keys and headed downstairs. When he got to the car, Claire was gripping the steering wheel like it might fly away if she let go. She looked at him through the passenger window, and something in her expression made his chest hurt. He got in. "I couldn't do it," Claire said. Her voice was rough, like she'd been talking herself through something for hours. "I got home, tried to convince myself we should take a break, that it was the smart thing, and I couldn't." "Claire, Bubty, let me finish." She finally let go of the wheel, turned to face him. "I'm tired of being smart. I'm tired of making the safe choice because I'm afraid of what people will think or say. I spent 10 years in a marriage that was safe and comfortable and slowly killing me, and when I finally got out, I promised myself I wouldn't do that again. That I wouldn't make myself smaller just to make other people more comfortable." Lucas waited, not sure where this was going. "So here's what I think we should do," Claire said. "We stop hiding, not in a stupid way, not announcing it or making a spectacle. But we stop pretending there's nothing between us. People are going to talk regardless. At least this way we're not lying." "You realize that's the opposite of what you said this afternoon." "I know, I changed my mind. I'm allowed to change my mind." What about your job? What about everything you said about being realistic?" Claire laughed, but it sounded bitter. "You know what's realistic? The fact that I've been working my ass off for 6 years and I'm still fighting to be taken seriously. The fact that no matter what I do, someone's going to find a reason to question me. So maybe I'm tired of playing by rules that were designed to keep me in my place." Lucas studied her face in the dim light from the street lamp. "What are you actually saying?" "I'm saying screw being careful. I like you, you like me, and I'm not going to apologize for that. We'll deal with the fallout if it comes. Together." Something shifted in Lucas's chest, fear mixing with relief, mixing with something that felt dangerously close to joy. "You're sure about this?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." She reached across the console, took his hand. "Are you in?" Lucas didn't hesitate. "Yeah, I'm in." Claire smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her all week, and squeezed his hand. "Good. Now come on, I haven't eaten and I'm starving. You said you make terrible dinner?" "The worst." "Perfect, show me." They ended up making pasta together in Lucas's tiny kitchen. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti with jarred sauce and whatever vegetables he had in the fridge that weren't actively growing mold. Claire chopped an onion while Lucas boiled water, and they moved around each other in the cramped space with the awkward coordination of people still learning each other's rhythms. "Your kitchen's smaller than mine," Claire observed, scraping onion into the pan. "Yeah, well, my rent's also smaller than yours." "Fair point." They ate sitting on Lucas's couch because his apartment didn't have a dining table, just a breakfast bar with one stool. The TV was on but muted, some cooking show neither of them was watching. The food was mediocre at best, but Claire ate like she meant it, and they both went back for seconds. "So," Lucas said after they'd exhausted the small talk about work and the weather and everything that didn't matter, "what's the actual plan here? For Monday?" "We act normal, we do our jobs, and if anyone asks, we tell them the truth." "Which is what exactly?" Claire set her plate down, thought about it. "That we're seeing each other, that it's new, that it doesn't affect our work, and we'd appreciate people respecting our privacy." "You think that'll work?" "Probably not. But it's better than lying and getting caught or hiding and making it seem like we've got something to be ashamed of." She picked at a loose thread on the couch cushion. "People are going to have opinions either way. I'd rather give them the boring version than let them make up something more interesting." Lucas nodded slowly. It made sense in a terrifying, no-going-back kind of way. "What about HR? Don't we have to disclose this or something?" "Technically, yes. There's a form. I'll take care of it Monday." Claire looked at him. "That's going to make it official. Company record." "Are you okay with that?" "Are you?" "I asked you first." "Claire, I'm 26. Nobody cares who I date. You're the one taking the risk here. Stop doing that." "Doing what?" "Acting like your feelings don't matter as much as mine, like you're just along for the ride." She shifted to face him more directly. "If we're doing this, we're doing it as equals. Your concerns are just as valid as mine. So I'm asking you, are you okay with this being on record?" Lucas thought about it, really thought about it. About what it meant to have his name next to Claire's in some HR database. About the scrutiny that might come with it. About all the ways this could complicate his life. And then he thought about the alternative. Pretending Friday night hadn't happened, that the hike hadn't happened, that sitting here eating bad pasta on his couch with her wasn't exactly where he wanted to be. "Yeah," he said. "I'm okay with it." Claire exhaled, and Lucas realized she'd been holding her breath. "Okay. Good." She stayed until almost midnight, and they talked about everything except work. Claire told him about growing up with a brother who was better at everything without trying, about her dad's love of books that bordered on obsessive, about her mom who worked doubles at the hospital and still made it to every school event. Lucas told her about his own fractured family. Parents divorced when he was 10. Dad who moved to Arizona and sent birthday cards twice a year if Lucas was lucky. Mom who tried too hard to make up for it. When Claire finally left, she kissed him at the door, longer than Saturday, more certain, and said, "See you Monday," like it was both a promise and a challenge. Lucas locked the door behind her and leaned against it, trying to process the fact that his life had just changed in a fundamental way, and he'd barely had time to think about it. Friday was strange. Lucas went to work expecting something to be different, for people to somehow know what had shifted. But the day unfolded like any other. Morning stand-up, code reviews, a team lunch at the Thai place down the street where everyone complained about the new ticketing system and debated whether the Blazers would make the playoffs. Claire was professional, friendly, exactly the same as always. If Lucas hadn't spent Thursday night on his couch with her, he might have thought he'd imagined the whole thing. It wasn't until late afternoon that he saw the cracks starting to show. He was walking past the QA area when he heard Marcus talking to Sarah, their voices low, but not quite low enough. "I'm telling you, something's up with those two. Did you see them in stand-up this morning? They barely looked at each other." "Maybe because people like you keep reading into everything," Sarah said, but she sounded interested despite herself. "Or maybe they're trying really hard to seem normal, and it's making them weird." Lucas kept walking, pulse kicking up. By the time he got back to his desk, his phone was buzzing with a text from Claire. "My office. 5 minutes." When he got there, Claire was standing at her window, arms crossed, staring out at the city. She didn't turn around when he came in. "Close the door," she said. Lucas did and waited. "I just got pulled into a meeting with Rachel," Claire said. Rachel was their director, Claire's boss. Someone filed a concern about potential favoritism. They didn't name names, but it was pretty obvious who they were talking about. Lucas's stomach dropped. "What did you tell her?" "I told her the truth. That we're seeing each other, that it's new, and that it hasn't and won't affect my professional judgment." Claire finally turned around, and her expression was hard to read. Rachel was surprisingly cool about it, actually. Said as long as we file the disclosure and keep things professional at work, she doesn't care what we do in our personal lives. "So we're good?" "With Rachel, yeah. With everyone else?" Claire shrugged. "That's going to be harder. Word's going to spread fast now. By Monday, the whole floor will know." Lucas moved closer, leaned against her desk. "How are you feeling about that?" "Honestly, terrified, but also kind of relieved. At least we're not hiding anymore." She rubbed her temples, a gesture Lucas was learning meant she was stressed but trying not to show it. Rachel did suggest one thing, though. She thinks it might be better if you transfer to a different team. Not immediately, but eventually. To avoid any appearance of impropriety. "You mean so you're not directly managing me?" "Yeah." Lucas thought about that. He liked his current team, liked the work, liked most of the people. But Claire was right. As long as she was his team lead, there'd always be questions. Every good review, every interesting project assignment, every promotion would be suspect. "Okay," he said, "if that's what it takes." Claire looked surprised. "Just like that? You're not going to argue?" "What's to argue? You're worth more than a team assignment." Something in her expression cracked, just slightly, and she looked away. "Don't say things like that when we're at work. It makes it hard to keep my professional face on." "Sorry." "No, you're not." "No, I'm not." Claire smiled despite herself, then got serious again. "I'm going to send out the HR disclosure Monday morning. Once that's official, there's no taking it back. Last chance to change your mind." "I'm not changing my mind. Even though this is going to get messy, especially because it's going to get messy." Lucas pushed off the desk, stood in front of her. "Look, I know I don't have as much experience with this as you do. Office politics, navigating all the unwritten rules, but I know one thing, I'm tired of being alone. And I'm tired of being careful about everything. So if being with you means dealing with gossip and awkward meetings and people having opinions, I'll deal with it. Claire searched his face like she was looking for doubt, for hesitation. When she didn't find it, she nodded once, sharp and decisive. Okay, then we do this. Together. Together. The weekend felt like the calm before a storm. Lucas spent Saturday catching up on laundry and trying not to obsess about Monday. Claire texted him Sunday afternoon asking if he wanted to come over for dinner, and he said yes before he'd even thought about it. This time when he arrived at her place, it felt different. Less like trespassing, more like belonging. Claire answered the door in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, and she looked more relaxed than he'd seen her all week. I'm making stir-fry, she said by way of greeting. Hope you're not allergic to anything. Just shellfish. Good, because I wasn't planning on using any. They cooked together again, and this time the movements were less awkward, more synchronized. Claire handed him vegetables to chop while she worked on the sauce, and they fell into an easy rhythm of passing ingredients and stealing bites and bumping elbows in the small space. Over dinner, Claire brought up the thing they'd both been avoiding. So tomorrow's going to suck, she said, matter of fact. Probably. People are going to have a lot of opinions. Let them. Claire set down her fork, studied him. You're handling this better than I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. Panic? Second thoughts? A sudden realization that maybe dating your team lead wasn't the best career move? Lucas shrugged. I thought about all that already. Decided it was worth it. What if I'm not? Not what? Worth it. Claire looked down at her plate, and Lucas saw vulnerability there that she usually kept locked away. What if this whole thing crashes and burns? What if we get 6 months in and realize we made a mistake, and then we're stuck seeing each other every day at work, and everything's awkward forever? Then we deal with it like adults. We work together professionally, we move on, and eventually it stops being weird. Lucas reached across the table, took her hand. But I don't think that's going to happen. You can't know that. No, I can't. But I can know that right now, sitting here with you, this feels right. And I'd rather have this and risk it ending than never try at all. Claire's hand tightened on his. When did you get so sure about things? About 3 seconds before I say them. It's a new strategy I'm trying. She laughed and the tension broke. They finished dinner and moved to the couch. And this time, when Claire curled up against him, it felt natural, easy. They put on a movie neither of them paid attention to, and somewhere around 10, Claire fell asleep with her head on his shoulder. Lucas stayed still, not wanting to wake her, and thought about tomorrow. About walking into the office with everyone knowing. About the looks they'd get, the whispers that would follow them from meeting to meeting. About Rachel's suggestion that he transfer teams, which made sense, but also felt like giving in to other people's discomfort. But mostly he thought about how Claire's breathing had evened out in sleep, how she'd let her guard down enough to actually rest. About how this, just being here, being trusted, felt like something worth fighting for. Monday morning arrived with the kind of gray drizzle that made Portland famous. Lucas got to work early, before most of the team, and was halfway through his first coffee when Claire walked in. She gave him the same quick nod she gave everyone, headed to her office, and closed the door. 20 minutes later, an email hit everyone's inbox from HR. Lucas's phone buzzed with it at the same time his computer did. Dear team, in accordance with company policy regarding workplace relationships, please be advised that Claire Bennett and Lucas Reed have submitted disclosure forms documenting a personal relationship. This disclosure is being made in the interest of transparency and to prevent any potential conflicts of interest. Both employees will continue to fulfill their current roles with professionalism and integrity. Should anyone have concerns about favoritism or inappropriate conduct, please follow standard HR reporting procedures. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Lucas read it twice, his heart hammering. It was clinical, professional, exactly the kind of language designed to make something personal sound like a business transaction. But it was also real, official, impossible to take back. His phone started buzzing immediately. Text from Marcus. Holy shit, man, for real? Another from Sarah. Called it. One from Jake. Congrats, I guess? Lucas ignored them all and walked to Claire's office. The door was open now and she was at her desk, face carefully neutral, reading something on her screen. You okay? He asked from the doorway. Ask me again in an hour. She glanced up and he saw the strain around her eyes. People are going to have a lot to say. Try not to take it personally. What if it gets bad? Then we handle it. Together, remember? Lucas nodded and went back to his desk. The morning passed in a strange blur of normalcy punctuated by odd moments. People looked at him more than usual. Conversations stopped when he walked into the break room. Someone made a joke during stand-up about workplace romance that wasn't quite cruel, but wasn't quite friendly either. Claire handled it like she handled everything, with cool professionalism that dared anyone to make it weird. When Marcus asked if this changed team dynamics, she said, "Only if you let it," and moved on to the next agenda item. But Lucas could see the toll it took, the way her shoulders tensed when people whispered, the extra effort she put into being fair, into making sure she wasn't giving Lucas any special treatment or advantage. At one point, she actually criticized his code in front of the team. Legitimately, the implementation was sloppy, and Lucas saw the calculation behind it. The need to prove she could still be objective. It made him angry on her behalf, that she had to work twice as hard to prove something that should have been taken for granted. Lunch was when things got tense. Lucas was heating up leftovers in the break room when David from the infrastructure team walked in. David was older, maybe 45, and he had the kind of opinions that he thought counted as wisdom because he'd been in tech longer than most of the people on the floor. "So you and Claire, huh?" David said, leaning against the counter with his coffee. "That's an interesting choice." Lucas kept his eyes on the microwave. "Is it? Just saying, dating the boss is usually not the career move people recommend. She's not my boss, she's my team lead." "Semantics." David sipped his coffee. "Look, I'm not trying to give you a hard time, but you gotta know how this looks. Young guy, older woman in a position of power. People are going to assume things." "Let them assume." "Yeah, but those assumptions affect her more than you. Just something to think about." The microwave beeped. Lucas pulled out his food, turned to face David. "You know what I think about? The fact that Claire's been working here for 6 years and she's brilliant at what she does, but she still has to prove herself every single day because people like you can't see past their assumptions. So maybe instead of worrying about how it looks, you could just treat her like the professional she is." David's expression hardened. "Careful, kid. You're new enough that you can still torpedo your career here. And you're experienced enough to know better than to question someone's competence based on their personal life. But here we are." Lucas walked out before David could respond, his hands shaking slightly from adrenaline. He made it back to his desk and sat down hard, his appetite gone. His phone buzzed. "Claire, did you just tell David from infrastructure to back off?" Lucas. "News travels fast." Claire. "He went straight to Rachel to complain. She told him to grow up." Lucas. "Am I in trouble?" Claire. "With me?" "No, with Rachel? She thinks it's hilarious. With David? Probably. But screw him." Lucas smiled despite himself, then looked up to find half the team watching him. He went back to his code, tried to focus, and mostly failed. The afternoon brought a different kind of tension. Lucas was in a code review with Claire and 2 other engineers when the conversation turned to an upcoming project assignment. It was a high-visibility feature, the kind that could lead to bigger opportunities, and Lucas had the right skill set for it. Claire didn't assign it to him. She gave it to Marcus instead, even though Lucas could see in her face that she knew he was the better choice, technically. After the meeting, Lucas caught up with her in the hallway. "That should have been my project," he said, keeping his voice low. "I know. So why? Because if I give you every good assignment, people will say it's favoritism, and right now we can't afford to give them ammunition." Claire looked tired, worn down in a way that made Lucas's chest ache. "I have to overcorrect, at least for a while, until people get bored and move on to the next piece of gossip." "That's not fair to you?" "No, it's not. But it's reality." She glanced around, making sure they were alone. "I knew this would be hard. I just didn't realize how hard." Lucas wanted to touch her, to offer some kind of comfort, but they were still at work and people were still watching. "What can I do?" "Just keep being good at your job. Keep your head down. And don't pick fights with David, even if he deserves it." "No promises on that last one." Claire almost smiled. "Fair enough." The next few days followed the same pattern. Whispers and looks, and the constant awareness that they were being watched, judged, analyzed. Claire maintained her professional distance at work, maybe even more than before, and Lucas tried not to take it personally. He knew she was protecting both of them. He knew she was doing what she had to do. But it still hurt sometimes, the way she'd look right through him in meetings, the way she'd criticize his work more harshly than anyone else's, the way she kept them separate in every way that mattered during work hours. Wednesday evening, Claire texted him, "Can you come over? I need to talk." Lucas drove to her place with his stomach in knots, half convinced she was about to end things. The stress was too much. The scrutiny was too much. He'd been naive to think they could make this work. But when she opened the door, she pulled him inside and kissed him hard, desperate, like she'd been holding back all day and finally couldn't anymore. "I hate this," she said when they broke apart. "I hate having to pretend at work. I hate overcorrecting. I hate that people can't just let us be." "So what do we do?" "I don't know. But I know I don't want to stop." She rested her forehead against his. "Tell me this is worth it. Tell me I'm not ruining both our careers for something that might not last." "It's worth it," Lucas said without hesitation. "And it's going to last. We're going to make it last. You can't promise that. Watch me." Claire laughed, shaky and almost broken, and held on to him like he was the only solid thing in her world. And Lucas held her back and hoped like hell he was right. Because the alternative, walking away, giving up, letting other people's opinions dictate their lives, was something neither of them could stomach anymore. Thursday brought a breakthrough they hadn't expected. Lucas was working on a critical bug that had been plaguing the production environment for weeks when he finally isolated the issue. It was subtle, elegant in its wrongness, the kind of problem that required both technical skill and creative thinking to solve. He fixed it, tested it, pushed the solution to staging, and it worked. Actually worked. The kind of win that got noticed. Rachel stopped by his desk that afternoon. "Nice work on the authentication issue. That's been haunting us for a month." "Thanks." It was a team effort, though. Sarah helped isolate the conditions, and Lucas, take the compliment. You did good work. Rachel glanced toward Claire's office, then back at him. "Look, I know the last week has been rough. People talk, people judge. But at the end of the day, what matters is the work. Keep doing work like this, and the rest will take care of itself." She walked away, and Lucas sat there feeling something like validation. Like maybe he could be good at his job and date Claire without the two things canceling each other out. When he looked up, Claire was watching from her office doorway. She gave him a small nod. Approval, pride, something that felt like solidarity, and then went back to work. That evening, the team went out for drinks to celebrate closing the sprint. It was tradition, optional but well attended, and Lucas had planned to skip it. But Claire texted him, "Come, we should show up together." So he went, and when he walked into the bar, Claire was already there, sitting with Marcus and Sarah and a few others. There was an empty seat next to her, and Lucas took it without overthinking it. "Beer?" Claire asked, like this was normal, like they did this all the time. "Yeah, whatever's on tap." She ordered for both of them, and they sat there surrounded by their co-workers, not hiding, but not making a spectacle either. Just two people who happened to be together, having drinks after work like everyone else. Marcus raised his glass. To Lucas for finally killing that authentication bug, and to Claire for not killing us during sprint planning. Everyone laughed and drank, and the conversation moved on to other things. Sports, weekend plans, the rumor that the company was getting acquired. Normal things. Easy things. At some point, Claire's hand found Lucas's under the table. Just for a moment. Just a quick squeeze, but it felt like progress. Like maybe they were going to figure out how to do this after all. When they left the bar around 9, Claire walked him to his car. "That wasn't so bad," she said. "No, it was good, actually. People are starting to get used to us. The novelty's wearing off." "Is that what we are? A novelty?" Claire smiled. "We're whatever we decide we are. And I decide we're something worth keeping." Lucas kissed her there in the parking lot, not caring who might see. When they broke apart, Claire was smiling for real, the kind of smile that made everything else worth it. "Go home," she said. "Get some sleep. I'll see you tomorrow." "See you tomorrow." Lucas drove home feeling lighter than he had in days, like maybe the worst was behind them, like maybe they'd weathered the storm and come out intact on the other side. He had no idea how wrong he was. Friday afternoon, everything fell apart. Lucas was reviewing pull requests when Claire appeared at his desk, her face carefully blank in that way he'd learned meant something was very wrong. Conference room. Now, she said quietly, then walked away before he could respond. Lucas's stomach dropped. He saved his work and followed her down the hall, aware of eyes tracking their movement. The conference room she'd chosen was one of the smaller ones, tucked in a corner away from most of the team. She was already inside when he arrived, standing with her arms crossed, staring at her phone. "Close the door," she said without looking up. Lucas did. "What's going on?" Claire turned her phone toward him. On the screen was an email chain, and Lucas felt his blood go cold as he read it. The first message was from someone in finance he'd never heard of, sent to Rachel and copied to HR. It detailed concerns about Claire's leadership decisions over the past 2 weeks, specifically calling out the project assignment that had gone to Marcus instead of Lucas. But the way it was phrased made it sound like Claire was giving Lucas preferential treatment by overcompensating, that she was so concerned about appearing impartial that she was actually being unfair to everyone else. The logic was twisted, circular, designed to make Claire wrong no matter what she did. "This is insane," Lucas said, handing the phone back. "You were trying to avoid favoritism, and now they're saying you're being too careful about avoiding favoritism?" "It gets better." Claire scrolled down. "David from infrastructure also sent a note saying I was emotionally compromised and questioning whether I should continue in a leadership role. And someone I don't even know from the marketing department apparently has opinions about workplace relationships and professional boundaries." "They can't do this. You've done nothing wrong. It doesn't matter what I've done or haven't done. What matters is perception." Claire's voice was tight, controlled, but Lucas could hear the anger underneath. "I knew there would be pushback. I knew people would have opinions, but I didn't think they'd try to undermine my entire career over it." Lucas felt rage building in his chest, hot and sharp. "What did Rachel say?" "She's in meetings all afternoon. I have a call with her and HR first thing Monday morning." Claire finally looked at him, and he saw fear there mixed with exhaustion. "Lucas, this is bad. This is the kind of thing that follows you. Even if Rachel backs me up, even if HR says everything's fine, people will remember. They'll question every decision I make." "So we fight back. We show them you're good at your job regardless of who you're dating." "With what?" "My stellar track record of the past 2 weeks where I've been so paranoid about showing favoritism that I've probably pissed off half the team?" She laughed, bitter. "They've got me in a box. If I treat you fairly, it's favoritism. If I overcorrect, I'm being biased against everyone else. There's no winning." Lucas moved closer, lowered his voice. "What do you need me to do?" "I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe this isn't something you can fix." "Don't do that. Don't shut me out." "I'm not shutting you out. I'm being realistic." Claire rubbed her temples, that stress gesture again. "Look, I need to think. I need to figure out how to handle this without making it worse. Can you just give me some space? Let me deal with this on my own?" The words hit harder than Lucas expected. "You don't have to do this alone." "Maybe I do. Maybe that's part of the problem. I've been so focused on us that I lost sight of everything else." "You don't mean that." Well, Claire's expression cracked just slightly. "I don't know what I mean right now. I just know I'm tired and angry, and I don't know how to fix this." Lucas wanted to argue, to push back, to make her see that walking away from him wouldn't solve anything, but he could see she was barely holding it together, and adding to her stress wasn't going to help. "Okay," he said quietly. "Take your time. Figure out what you need. I'll be here." Claire nodded, not meeting his eyes, and Lucas left the conference room feeling like he'd just lost something he couldn't name. The rest of Friday dragged. Lucas tried to work but couldn't focus, his mind cycling through scenarios and solutions that all felt inadequate. Claire stayed in her office with the door closed, and Lucas watched people whisper as they walked past, saw the way the gossip spread like poison through the floor. By 4 o'clock, he couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed his jacket and left early, drove home with the radio off, and sat in his apartment staring at his phone. He wanted to text Claire to check on her, to offer support even if she said she didn't need it. But every message he drafted felt wrong, too much or not enough, so he ended up sending nothing. Saturday morning came with no word from Claire. Lucas ran errands on autopilot, bought groceries he didn't need, cleaned his apartment even though it was already clean. His phone stayed silent. By Saturday evening, he broke down and texted her, "How are you holding up?" The response came an hour later. Okay, need some time to think. Talk soon. Lucas stared at those words, trying to read meaning into the spaces between them. Talk soon could mean anything. Tomorrow. Next week. Never. He tried to sleep Saturday night and failed, lay awake until 3 in the morning before finally giving up and watching bad TV until dawn. Sunday morning, his phone rang, Claire's name on the screen. Lucas answered before the second ring. Hey, he said. Hey, can we talk? In person? Lucas's chest tightened. Yeah. When? Now? I'm downstairs. Lucas went to the window, pulled back the curtain. Claire's Subaru was parked in the same spot it had been that Thursday night when she'd shown up saying she couldn't do careful anymore. That felt like a lifetime ago. He buzzed her up, opened his apartment door, and waited. When Claire appeared at the top of the stairs, she looked like she hadn't slept either. Shadows under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing the same sweatpants and oversized sweatshirt he'd seen her in before. She came inside, and Lucas closed the door behind her. They stood in his small entryway, and the silence stretched out uncomfortable and uncertain. I've been thinking, Claire said finally, about everything, about us, about work, about what happens next. Lucas's heart was hammering, but he kept his voice steady. And I think we need to make some changes, real ones, not just talking about it. She took a breath. I spoke to Rachel yesterday, told her I think it's time I moved to a different team, get out from under the scrutiny, start fresh somewhere without all this baggage. Claire, you love your team. You built that team. I know, but I can't keep doing this, constantly defending myself, second-guessing every decision, worrying about how everything looks. It's killing me. She met his eyes. And it's not fair to you either. You shouldn't have to watch me twist myself in knots trying to prove I'm still good at my job. You are good at your job. Better than good. This whole thing is just people looking for something to be angry about. Maybe, but it doesn't change the fact that as long as I'm your team lead, this will follow us. People will always question it. She moved to the couch, sat down heavily. Rachel said there's an opening on the platform team. Different focus, different people. It would be a lateral move, not a demotion, and I'd be working on infrastructure instead of features. It's actually kind of interesting. Lucas sat next to her, careful to leave space between them. Is that what you want? I don't know, but I think it might be what I need. Claire pulled her knees up, wrapped her arms around them. The other option is we end this. We go back to just being colleagues, and eventually people forget and move on, and I stay where I am. Is that what you want? No, but I'm trying to be realistic about our options here. Lucas thought about it, about what she was offering. A fresh start for her, away from the team and the gossip and the constant scrutiny. It made sense. It was probably the smart play. But something about it felt like giving in, like letting other people's small-mindedness dictate their lives. What if we did something else? He said slowly. Like what? What if I transferred instead? You stay with your team, keep doing what you're good at, and I move somewhere else. Take the heat off both of us. Claire looked at him like he'd suggested something crazy. Lucas, you like where you are. Your work is good, you're building a reputation. Why would you give that up? Because you've worked harder and longer to get where you are. Because you built that team from scratch and you care about those people. Because I can do good work anywhere, but this is your thing. I'm not going to be the reason you walk away from it. It's not your decision to make. I know, but it's my career to risk if I want to. Lucas shifted closer, took her hand. Claire, I don't care which team I'm on. I care about doing work that matters and being with someone who makes me want to show up. The rest is just details. Claire's eyes were bright, and Lucas wasn't sure if she was about to cry or yell at him or both. You can't just sacrifice your career for me. That's not how this works. I'm not sacrificing anything. I'm making a choice. There's a difference. Lucas, look, you said we're equals, right? That my feelings matter as much as yours? So let me make this choice. Let me be the one who moves. He squeezed her hand. You can take the platform team if you want to, if it's actually what you want. But don't do it just because you think it's the only way to make this work. Claire was quiet for a long time, staring at their joined hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. What did I do to deserve you? Probably something terrible in a past life. She laughed, watery and broken, and leaned into him. Lucas wrapped his arms around her and held on, and they sat there on his couch while morning light filtered through the windows and the city woke up outside. "I'm scared," Claire said into his shoulder. "I'm scared this is all going to fall apart, that we're going to lose our jobs or our reputations or each other, and I'll be left wondering why I thought this was a good idea." "Me too," Lucas admitted. "But I'm more scared of walking away and spending the rest of my life wondering what could have been." Claire pulled back enough to look at him. "You really mean that?" "Yeah, I really do." She kissed him then, slow and certain, and Lucas tasted salt and knew she'd been crying even though he hadn't seen the tears. When they broke apart, Claire rested her forehead against his. "Okay," she said. "We'll figure it out. Together. Together." They spent the rest of Sunday planning. Lucas would put in for a transfer to the mobile team. They'd been trying to recruit him for months anyway, and the work was interesting even if it meant learning new frameworks. Claire would stay with her current team, but have a conversation with Rachel about bringing in a co-lead, someone who could help share the management load and provide another layer of oversight. It wouldn't eliminate all the concerns, but it would help. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the clean solution either of them wanted, but it was something they could both live with. Monday morning, Lucas walked into Rachel's office before the official workday started. She looked up from her coffee, unsurprised to see him. "Let me guess," she said. "You want to talk about the transfer. How did you—" "Claire called me last night, gave me the heads up." Rachel gestured for him to sit. "Look, I appreciate what you're trying to do here. Taking the heat off Claire, making this easier on everyone, but I need to know this is what you actually want, not just some grand gesture." "It's both," Lucas said honestly. "I want to be with Claire, and I want to do work I care about. The mobile team's been trying to recruit me anyway, so this seems like good timing." "The mobile team reports to a different director. You'd be completely separate from Claire's chain of command. No overlap, no appearance of impropriety." Rachel paused. "But people will still talk. You know that, right?" "Let them. As long as I'm doing good work and Claire's doing good work. What else matters?" Rachel smiled, just slightly. "I like you, Lucas. You're either very brave or very stupid, and I haven't decided which yet." She pulled up something on her computer. "I'll fast-track the transfer. You can start with mobile next sprint. That gives you 2 weeks to wrap up current projects and hand off anything that needs handoff." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. This is still going to be complicated, but for what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing." She looked at him over her coffee. "Claire's good at what she does. Don't let her forget that." "I won't." Lucas left Rachel's office feeling lighter than he had in days. He found Claire already at her desk, and when their eyes met across the floor, she gave him a questioning look. He nodded once, and relief washed over her face. The morning passed in a strange kind of normalcy. Lucas worked on his current projects knowing they'd soon belong to someone else. Claire had her meeting with Rachel and HR about the concerns that had been raised, and when she came out an hour later, she looked exhausted but intact. She stopped by his desk on her way back to her office. HR's going to send out a note clarifying that all leadership decisions are reviewed and approved by Rachel. They're also reminding everyone about the anti-retaliation policy and professional conduct standards. Will that help? Probably not, but at least it's on record. She glanced around, lowered her voice. "Rachel told me about the transfer. You didn't have to do that." "I know. I wanted to." "Thank you," Claire said quietly. "For all of it." She walked back to her office before Lucas could respond, but he saw the way her shoulders had loosened slightly, the way she carried herself a little straighter. Small victories. The next 2 weeks were a blur of transition meetings and knowledge transfer. Lucas documented everything, walked Marcus through the projects he was handing off, and tried to ignore the speculation about why he was suddenly changing teams. Most people assumed it was related to Claire. They weren't wrong, but a few seemed to think it was about career advancement or getting away from the drama. Lucas let them think whatever they wanted. Claire kept her head down and focused on work. The HR memo seemed to help, or at least make people more careful about what they said out loud. David from infrastructure stopped making comments. The whispers in the break room became less frequent. Life didn't go back to normal. There was no normal to go back to, but it found a new equilibrium. On Lucas's last day with the team, they did a small send-off lunch at the Thai place. Claire was there, professional and friendly, and she gave a short speech about how Lucas had been a valuable team member and they'd miss working with him. It was generic enough to be safe, but Lucas heard the subtext underneath. The real goodbye would come later, in private. That evening, Lucas drove to Claire's place for what had become their regular Wednesday dinner. When she opened the door, she looked worn out, the kind of tired that came from weeks of stress finally catching up. "Hey," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "Hey yourself." Lucas followed her to the kitchen where something was already simmering on the stove. "You okay?" Getting there, Claire stirred whatever she was making. It smelled like soup, something with garlic and vegetables. "It's been a long few weeks." "Yeah." They fell into the familiar rhythm of cooking together, Lucas chopping bread for grilled cheese while Claire finished the soup. It felt good, normal, like they'd found their way back to something solid after weeks of standing on shifting ground. Over dinner, Claire brought up what they'd both been avoiding. "So you start with Mobile Monday," she said. "Yeah, new team, new projects, new everything." "You nervous?" "A little. Mostly excited, though. It'll be good to have a fresh start." Claire nodded, pushed soup around her bowl. "I've been thinking about what comes next. For us, I mean." Lucas set down his spoon, gave her his full attention. "I think we're past the worst of it," Claire continued. "The gossip's dying down. People are moving on to the next thing. And with you on a different team, there's no conflict of interest anymore. We can just be together, without all the complications." "Is that what you want?" "Yeah, I think it is." She looked at him and there was something vulnerable in her expression. "I know this hasn't been easy. I know I've been difficult, going back and forth, making you jump through hoops. But I want to try to do this right. Be together without all the fear and second guessing." Lucas reached across the table, took her hand. "I want that too." "Good. Because I'm done being scared. I'm done letting other people's opinions dictate how I live my life." Claire's grip tightened. "You were right. That night you showed up and said we should stop hiding. We can't control what people think. We can only control how we respond to it. Look at you being all wise and stuff. Don't get used to it. I'm still going to be a mess most of the time. I'm counting on it." They finished dinner and moved to the couch. And this time, when Claire curled up against him, there was no tension, no worry about who might see or what it might mean. Just two people who'd decided each other was worth the fight. "So what do we do now?" Lucas asked. "Now that we're officially past the worst of it?" "I don't know. Normal couple things? Movies and dinners and boring weekends? Maybe take a trip somewhere? Where would we go?" Claire thought about it. "Somewhere neither of us has been. Somewhere we can just be ourselves without worrying about running into coworkers or having to explain anything." "That sounds perfect." They talked about possibilities. The coast, the mountains, maybe even flying somewhere for a long weekend. The conversation was easy, comfortable, full of small plans and quiet hopes. The kind of future building that felt both mundane and precious. Sometime around 11, Claire's eyes started drooping. Lucas suggested he should go, let her get some sleep, but she shook her head. "Stay," she said. "I mean, actually stay, not on the couch this time." Lucas's heart kicked up. "You sure?" "Yeah, I'm sure." They moved to her bedroom, and Lucas was struck by how normal it felt, how right. They got ready for bed with the casual intimacy of people who'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. Claire in her usual sleep shirt, Lucas in the gym shorts she kept at her place now for nights like this. They lay in the dark, Claire's head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders, and Lucas thought about how far they'd come, from that first rainy night to now, through all the complications and fear, and people trying to tear them apart. "Lucas?" Claire's voice was soft, already half asleep. "Yeah? Thank you for not giving up on this, on us. Thank you for being worth fighting for." Claire made a sleepy sound of contentment, and her breathing evened out. Lucas stayed awake a little longer, listening to the rain that had started up outside, softer than that first night, gentle instead of violent, and felt something settle in his chest. They'd made it through the storm. Maybe not unscathed, maybe with some damage they'd be dealing with for a while, but they'd made it, together, and that was enough. Lucas fell asleep with Claire warm against him and rain pattering on the windows. And for the first time in weeks, he didn't dream of things falling apart. He dreamed of building something new, something solid, something that could weather whatever came next. When morning came, they'd start over. New team for Lucas, new normal for both of them. But for now, in the dark and quiet of Claire's bedroom with the world outside still asleep, they had this moment. And it was more than enough. It was everything. Lucas's first Monday with the mobile team started with the kind of nervous energy he hadn't felt since his first day at Portland Tech. New desk, new faces, new code base that looked nothing like what he'd been working on for the past 8 months. His team lead was a guy named Owen, mid-30s, perpetually wearing band t-shirts, the kind of engineer who could debug anything but couldn't remember to comb his hair. "So you're the guy," Owen said when Lucas showed up at his new desk. "I'm a guy. Not sure about the guy. Claire's guy, the one everyone's been talking about." Owen said it matter-of-factly, without judgment, like he was stating the weather. "Just so you know, I don't care. Do good work, don't be an asshole, and we'll get along fine." Lucas felt something unclench in his chest. "I can do that." "Good. Now let me show you the dumpster fire you just inherited." The mobile code base was exactly that, a mess of technical debt and quick fixes that had accumulated over years. But it was an interesting mess, the kind of challenge Lucas actually enjoyed. Owen walked him through the architecture, pointed out the landmines, and by lunch, Lucas was already elbow-deep in code. At noon, his phone buzzed. "Claire, how's day 1? Lucas. "Good. Owen's cool. The code is a disaster, but in a fun way." "Claire, that's the Lucas I know. See you tonight?" Lucas. "Yeah, your place or mine?" "Claire, yours. I'll bring dinner." Lucas smiled at his phone, typed back a thumbs up, and went back to work. It felt good, having that separation. Being able to text Claire without worrying about who might see, without the weight of professional boundaries pressing down on every word. The afternoon flew by. Lucas paired with another engineer named Rita on a thorny state management problem, and they ended up in one of those flow states where time disappeared and suddenly it was 6:30 and most of the floor had cleared out. "You staying late on your first day?" Rita asked, packing up her laptop. "That's either very dedicated or very stupid." "Little of both, probably." "Well, don't make a habit of it. Owen's big on work-life balance, says burnout is just bad engineering." She headed for the elevator, called back over her shoulder. "Welcome to the team, Lucas." Lucas finished up what he was working on, documented his progress, and drove home feeling more settled than he had in weeks. When he got to his apartment, Claire's car was already there, and he found her sitting on his doorstep with 2 bags of Thai food. "You're late," she said, but she was smiling. "Sorry, got caught up." "First day and you're already working late. I'm a bad influence." "You're the worst." Lucas unlocked the door and they went inside, falling into the easy rhythm of unpacking food and grabbing plates. They ate sitting on his couch, and Claire asked about his day, the real details, not just the surface stuff. And Lucas told her about Owen and Rita and the beautiful disaster of the mobile code base. "Sounds like you made the right choice," Claire said. "Yeah, I think so." Lucas set his plate aside. "How was your day?" "Actually good. Rachel approved bringing on a co-lead like we talked about. This woman named Jennifer from the infrastructure team. She's smart, experienced, and she doesn't give a damn about office politics." "That sounds perfect." "It is. Means I can focus more on the technical side and less on all the management stuff I'm not great at anyway." Claire leaned back, stretched. "First time in weeks, I feel like I can actually breathe." Lucas pulled her closer, and she settled against him with that comfortable ease they'd developed. They watched bad reality TV without really paying attention, just existing in the same space, and Lucas thought about how much had changed in such a short time. 3 months ago, he'd been alone in this apartment, filling time with work and not much else. Now Claire was here, her shoes by the door, her jacket thrown over his chair, her presence filling all the empty spaces he hadn't realized were empty until she'd shown up. "What are you thinking about?" Claire asked. "How lucky I am." "That's corny. Doesn't make it less true." Claire tilted her head up to kiss him, and they stayed like that for a while, not pushing it further, just being close. Eventually she pulled away and said, "I should probably go home. Early meeting tomorrow. Or you could stay." Lucas Reed, "Are you trying to get me to sleep over on a Monday night?" "Is it working?" Claire pretended to think about it. I don't have clothes for tomorrow. You have clothes here. That drawer you claimed last week. I claimed half a drawer. That's different. Fine, claim the whole drawer. Hell, claim the whole dresser if you want. Just stay. Claire smiled, soft and real. Okay, I'll stay. They got ready for bed, and Lucas was struck again by how domestic it all felt. How right. Claire borrowed one of his t-shirts, brushed her teeth with a toothbrush she'd left in his bathroom, and climbed into bed like she'd been doing it for years. This is nice, she said, curled up against him. Having this. Us. Yeah, it is. I was so scared we wouldn't make it here, that the pressure would be too much and we'd fall apart. We almost did. But we didn't. That counts for something. Lucas kissed the top of her head. It counts for everything. They fell asleep tangled together, and Lucas woke up around 3 a.m. to find Claire sprawled across most of the bed, one arm flung over his chest, her face peaceful in sleep. He lay there in the dark, listening to her breathe, and felt grateful in a way that made his chest ache. The next few weeks settled into a pattern. Lucas threw himself into the mobile team, learning the systems, building relationships, proving himself all over again. It was exhausting, but good. The kind of challenge that reminded him why he'd gotten into engineering in the first place. Owen was a great lead, supportive without being overbearing, willing to let Lucas take risks and learn from mistakes. Claire's co-lead Jennifer started the following Monday, and within days it was obvious they worked well together. Jennifer handled the people management stuff Claire had always struggled with, while Claire focused on architecture and technical direction. The team responded well, and slowly the tension that had been hanging over everything started to dissipate. People moved on, found new things to gossip about. David from infrastructure got put on a performance improvement plan for unrelated reasons, and suddenly everyone had bigger scandals to whisper about. Lucas and Claire found their rhythm. They spent weeknights at one of their apartments, making dinner and watching TV and doing laundry like normal people. Weekends were for hiking or exploring the city or just staying in bed until noon because they could. They went to team happy hours separately and left separately, but sometimes their eyes would meet across the bar and they'd share a look that felt like a secret even though everyone knew. It wasn't perfect. They still got looks sometimes, still heard the occasional comment. Marcus asked Lucas once if dating the former team lead was weird, and Lucas said honestly that it was sometimes, but worth it. Sarah told Claire at a coffee run that she admired her for not backing down, for fighting for what she wanted, and Claire had actually gotten a little misty-eyed about it. 2 months into Lucas's new role, the mobile team shipped a major feature that had been in development for over a year. It was smooth, stable, everything they'd hoped for. Owen took the team out to celebrate, and Lucas found himself at a bar with people who felt like actual friends, not just coworkers he tolerated. Rita leaned over during her second beer and said, "You know, when you first joined, I thought you were going to be all drama. The guy who dated his team lead and caused all that mess. Thanks for the vote of confidence. But you're not. You're just good at what you do. The rest is just noise." She raised her glass. "To ignoring the noise." Lucas clinked his glass against hers and meant it. That Friday, Claire showed up at Lucas's apartment with a bottle of wine and a nervous energy he hadn't seen in weeks. "What's wrong?" he asked as soon as she walked in. "Nothing's wrong. I need to talk to you about something." She set the wine down, paced to the window and back. "I've been thinking about the future, our future, and I know it's early. I know we've only been together a few months, but I can't stop thinking about it." Lucas's heart started hammering. "Okay, what specifically?" "I don't want to live in two places anymore. It's inefficient and wasteful, and I spend half my time trying to remember which apartment my stuff is at." She stopped pacing, looked at him directly. "I want us to live together. Actually live together, not just spend most nights at each other's places." Lucas felt relief wash over him. "You scared me. I thought you were going to say you wanted to break up." "Are you kidding? I'm trying to move in with you and you think I want to break up? You were nervous. I didn't know what to think." Claire laughed, shaky with adrenaline. "I'm nervous because this is a big deal, because we went through hell to be together, and now I'm asking you to take another huge step, and I don't know if it's too fast or too much, or—" Lucas crossed the room and kissed her, cutting off the spiral of anxiety. When he pulled back, he said, "Yes." "Yes, what?" "Yes, let's live together. Your place is bigger, so we should probably go with that, but yes, absolutely yes." Claire's face did something complicated. Relief and joy and fear all mixed together. You're sure? Because once we do this, there's no going back. Everyone will know. It'll be official. Good. I want it to be official. Lucas took her hands. Claire, I'm not scared of people knowing we're together. I'm only scared of not being with you. That's really corny. You keep saying that like it's a bad thing. It's not. It's just... Claire's eyes were bright. You're good at this. The relationship thing. Better than me. I've had a good teacher. Liar. I'm terrible at this. I panic constantly and overthink everything, and I've tried to push you away at least 3 times. Yeah, but you didn't. You stayed. That's what counts. Claire kissed him again, longer this time, and when they broke apart, she was smiling. Okay, let's do this. Let's move in together and be disgustingly domestic. Can't wait. They spent the weekend planning. Lucas gave notice on his apartment, agreed to be out by the end of the month. They went through both places, figuring out what to keep and what to get rid of. Claire had better furniture, Lucas had better kitchen equipment. They combined books and argued good-naturedly about whether Lucas's terrible abstract painting from college had to come or could quietly disappear. It has sentimental value, Lucas argued. It's hideous, which is why it has sentimental value. My mom gave me that. Claire sighed. Fine, but it's going in your office space, not anywhere guests can see it. Deal. Moving day was chaos. Lucas's brother drove up from Eugene to help, and Claire's friend from grad school showed up with her truck. They hauled boxes up 3 flights of stairs, rearranged furniture 6 times, took a break for pizza, and kept going until everything was in and the old apartment was empty. By the time everyone left, Lucas and Claire were exhausted, surrounded by boxes in what was now their apartment. Not hers, not his. Theirs. I can't believe we did this, Claire said, sitting on the floor amid the chaos. We did a lot of things I couldn't believe. Lucas sat next to her, surveyed the disaster zone. We can unpack tomorrow, or the day after, or next week. Claire leaned against him, and they sat there in comfortable silence. Outside, the city hummed with Friday night energy, people heading to bars and restaurants and wherever people went when they had plans. Inside, Lucas and Claire had everything they needed. Hey, Lucas? Yeah? I love you. The words landed soft between them, the first time either of them had said it out loud. Lucas felt his chest tighten with something too big to name. I love you too, he said, and meant it more than he'd meant anything in his life. Claire turned to kiss him, and they stayed like that for a while, surrounded by boxes and the evidence of lives being merged. When they finally pulled apart, Claire's eyes were suspiciously bright. We should probably find the sheets, she said, and figure out which box has the coffee maker. I'm not functioning tomorrow without coffee. Priorities. They dug through boxes until they found bedding, made the bed together with the kind of bickering that came from 2 people who had different ideas about hospital corners. They found the coffee maker and set it up for morning, found toothbrushes and towels, gave up on finding anything else. That night, lying in their bed in their apartment, Lucas thought about the path that had led them here. That first rainy night when he'd offered Claire a ride home. The dinner that turned into something more. The weeks of hiding and fear and nearly falling apart under the pressure. The choice to fight for each other instead of taking the easy way out. What are you thinking about? Claire asked, her voice already soft with sleep. How we almost didn't make it here. But we did? Yeah, we did. Claire's hand found his in the dark, squeezed once. No more almost. We're here now, that's what matters. Lucas agreed, and they fell asleep holding hands like teenagers, in the home they'd built together out of courage and stubbornness and the refusal to let other people's fear dictate their lives. The next morning, Lucas woke to sun streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee. He found Claire in the kitchen, wearing one of his t-shirts and her pajama pants, staring at the coffee maker like it might have answers. This thing is more complicated than it needs to be, she said when she noticed him. You literally programmed it last night. Yeah, but that was last night. This is morning. Morning me is dumber. Lucas laughed and took over coffee duties while Claire started on breakfast. They ate standing at the counter because they hadn't unpacked the table yet and talked about the day ahead. Unpacking, organizing, making the place actually livable. Normal couple things. Around noon, Lucas's phone rang. his mom's name on the screen. He'd been putting off this conversation, not sure how to explain everything that had happened. "Hey, Mom." "Lucas, I've been trying to reach you for days. Did you move? I sent a care package to your old address." "Yeah, sorry, I meant to call. I moved in with my girlfriend." There was a pause on the other end. "Girlfriend? Since when do you have a girlfriend?" "Since about 3 months ago. It's been complicated." "Complicated how?" Lucas glanced at Claire, who was watching with amusement. "We worked together. It caused some drama, but we figured it out." "You work together. Lucas, that's... I know, it's not ideal. But she's worth it, Mom. She's really worth it." Another pause, and Lucas could practically hear his mom recalibrating. "Okay, tell me about her." So Lucas did. He told her about Claire, about how they'd met, about the rainstorm and the dinner and all the complications that followed. He told her about the choice to fight for each other, about transferring teams, about moving in together even though it was fast and risky, and everything his practical engineering brain said was a bad idea. His mom listened without interrupting, and when he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "She sounds special," she said finally. "She is." "Then I'm happy for you, honey. I know the last few years have been hard. You deserve someone who makes you want to try." Lucas felt his throat tighten. "Thanks, Mom." "When do I get to meet her?" Lucas looked at Claire, who was definitely eavesdropping now. "Soon. Maybe Thanksgiving?" Claire nodded enthusiastically. "Thanksgiving sounds perfect," his mom said. "Tell her I can't wait to meet the woman who finally got my son to commit to something." They talked for a few more minutes before hanging up, and Claire immediately said, "Thanksgiving? You're bringing me home for Thanksgiving? Is that okay?" "It's terrifying and wonderful and exactly the kind of thing that makes me realize how serious this is." "Too serious?" "No, just serious enough." Claire kissed him. "I'd love to meet your mom." They spent the rest of the weekend unpacking and settling in. Claire's books went on the shelves mixed with Lucas's. Their clothes shared the closet. Their lives overlapped in 1,000 small ways. By Sunday night, the apartment looked lived in instead of chaos, and they collapsed on the couch, exhausted. "We did it," Claire said. "We did." "Think people at work will make a big deal about it?" "Probably, but at this point, what's one more thing for them to talk about?" Claire laughed. "Fair point." Monday came and Lucas went to work feeling lighter than he had in months. The mobile team barely reacted when he mentioned moving in with his girlfriend. Owen made a joke about being domesticated. Rita said something about relationship goals, and that was it. No drama, no judgment, just people getting on with their lives. At lunch, Lucas ran into Claire in the lobby. They were both grabbing food from the cart outside, and they stood in line together making small talk like colleagues who happened to be in the same place at the same time. But when their hands brushed reaching for napkins, Lucas felt that familiar spark, and Claire's quick smile said she felt it too. "See you tonight?" she said as they parted ways. "See you at home," Lucas corrected, and the word, home, singular, shared, felt like the most natural thing in the world. The next few months unfolded in a pattern of work and domesticity that Lucas hadn't known he wanted. He and Claire fell into routines: who made coffee, who cooked dinner, whose turn it was to do laundry. They had their first fight over cleaning the bathroom and made up an hour later. They hosted dinner for friends and impressed no one with their cooking. They spent a weekend in Cannon Beach and most of it in bed at the hotel because the rain made going outside pointless. Work settled into its own rhythm. Lucas became a core member of the mobile team, respected for his skill and reliability. Claire and Jennifer transformed their team into one of the most productive in the company, and the whispers about favoritism and impropriety faded into background noise that no one paid attention to anymore. 6 months after moving in together, Lucas came home to find Claire in the kitchen making his carbonara recipe, or trying to. She'd forgotten to take the pan off heat before adding the eggs, and was staring at scrambled eggs mixed with pasta like they'd personally betrayed her. "This looked easier when you did it," she said. "It is easier when I do it. I'm better at cooking." Rude but accurate. Claire dumped the whole mess in the trash. "Order pizza?" "Obviously." While they waited for delivery, they sat on the couch and Claire said, "I've been thinking about something." "That's usually dangerous." "Shut up, I'm being serious." She took a breath. "My lease is up in 3 months, which is technically our lease now. And I've been thinking we should look for a bigger place, somewhere with actual space and maybe a spare room. For what? I don't know, office space, guest room when your mom visits, future. She stopped, looked uncertain. Future what? Future things. Maybe. Claire picked at a loose thread on the couch. I'm not saying we should plan for kids or anything. That's way down the line if it happens at all. But maybe a place with room to grow? Options? Lucas felt something warm spread through his chest. You're thinking about the future, like the long-term future. Is that weird? No, it's perfect. Lucas pulled her closer. Let's find a bigger place, with room for future things and options. Yeah? Yeah. They spent the next month apartment hunting, looking at places all over Portland. Claire wanted somewhere with character. Lucas wanted somewhere with parking. They both wanted something they could actually afford. They finally found a place in a neighborhood between their offices. 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, a kitchen big enough for both of them to cook in at the same time. They signed the lease on a Tuesday in April, almost exactly a year after that first rainy night. Moving day was less chaotic this time, just them and a rented truck and a lot of boxes. They unloaded everything in the new space, and Lucas stood in the empty living room thinking about how far they'd come. You okay? Claire asked, coming up beside him. Just thinking. A year ago I was sitting in the office late because I had nowhere better to be. And now I have all this. He gestured at the apartment, at her, at the life they'd built. It's kind of overwhelming. Good overwhelming. The best overwhelming. They spent the evening unpacking the essentials and ordering Chinese food because neither of them had the energy to cook. They ate sitting on the floor because the furniture wasn't arranged yet, and talked about the year behind them and the years ahead. I never thought I'd have this, Claire said quietly. A partnership that actually works. Someone who doesn't need me to be smaller or quieter or less ambitious. I never thought I'd find someone worth fighting for, worth all the complicated stuff. Lucas set down his food, took her hand. But here we are. Here we are. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and then Claire said, Hey, Lucas. Yeah? Remember that first night when you drove me home and I asked you to stay? Kind of hard to forget. I knew then that this was going to be something. I was terrified, but I knew. She looked at him, and her eyes were bright. I'm glad I didn't let the fear win. Me too. Later that night, lying in their new bedroom in their new apartment, Lucas thought about everything that had led them here. The rain and the dinner and the choice to try. The gossip and the fear and nearly falling apart. The decision to fight instead of flee. The transfer and the moving and the slow building of something solid. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been smooth. But it had been real, and that counted for more than any perfect story could. Lucas? Claire's voice was soft in the dark. Yeah? No more sleeping on the couch. Lucas smiled, pulled her closer. No more sleeping on the couch. Outside, rain started to fall, gentle this time, the kind that lulled you to sleep instead of keeping you awake. Inside, Lucas and Claire held each other in the home they'd built together, and the future spread out ahead of them full of possibility and promise, and all the ordinary magic of 2 people who'd chosen each other against the odds. They fell asleep to the sound of rain, and when morning came, they'd wake up together in their space, ready for whatever came next. Because they'd learned the most important lesson, that love wasn't about avoiding complications or playing it safe. It was about finding someone worth fighting for, and then doing the work every single day to prove it. And they would. For all the days ahead, through storms and sunshine, through all the beautiful messiness of building a life together, they would fight, they would stay, they would love, and they would never, ever sleep on the couch again.